Welcome, everyone, to episode number 65 of Chatting with Nuts here on a wonderful November evening. My guest tonight is Laura from Fantasy Awash. Laura, how are you? And why don't you tell the folks what you're all about?
What I am all about? That's an open-ended question. I wasn't prepared. I am a new booktuber. I'm part of the 2023 class. I am primarily fantasy. I love some historical fiction as well. I nerd up for pretty much all things ancient Rome, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, religion. That's kind of my thing. I try to interject some of that into my videos, and yeah, happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. I absolutely loved your conversation that you had with Joanna and Alan about the book Augustus, which I famously
Okay.
DNF'd, not because I didn't like it, but because I was like, oh, this is letters. And I just stopped reading it.
Yes, it is epistolary.
But I will say, listening to you and Alan go back and forth, I just related so much with Joanna as she sat there and was like,
I
just
felt
waiting.
so bad. We did talk to her beforehand, and we were like, do you want to do this? And she was like, yes, I don't know the history. And I was like, that's okay. If you still want to join, we're happy to have you. And then I felt like Alan and I kind of kept going at some points, and I was like, you got to stop because Joanna to be involved.
When Joanna spoke beautifully about the book and was
She
able,
did. I
but
thought she did, but I always think that Joanna has really poignant and wonderful things to say. So that's no different from most of her videos. So I was
she
definitely happy.
she does make a habit of that. She really does.
I know.
One of the reasons why you like the book so much, though, is because you know a ton about Roman history and the
I
Roman
do.
Empire, and we've never had anyone on the show before that knows this much about the Roman Empire at all. Like, I can't think of a single guest who I would say, that person really gets Roman history.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's
there's no
beautiful.
other booktuber I can possibly think of. I mean, no one has a name related to the ancient world on here. No one talks about it at all. No one.
Yeah, and I like to bring on, subject matter experts every now and then. We're gonna talk about books a lot, but like,
Right.
I would love to learn a little about Rome because everyone else I bring on, they just know a little bit. They just know a little bit
Right.
of surface level. And we all think about the Roman Empire every single day.
Every single day. That's what
Every
I've been
single day.
told. And I mean, the two things that we know, right, are all roads lead to Rome, and that we all think about the Roman Empire every single day. So really, I mean, Rome's on the brain pretty much constantly.
Oh, and Marcus Aurelius. I mean, I love thinking about him and his meditations and
He's become really muscular, I've noticed, on BookTube recently. So that's been pretty interesting. He's hitting up all the protein, apparently. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Joanna, we had a talk, and she told me about it. She's like, have you noticed this? And I was like, no. And she made me look it up, and I was like, what is happening on my screen right now? So yeah, it's just been a weird revolution for Marcus Aurelius. It's not one that anyone asked for, but it's the one that we're getting.
the beautiful thing is I actually don't have any opinions about Marcus Aurelius. I just like tilting Alan.
Oh, it's so easy too. I did it earlier in his sprint. So all you have to do is say he's a great emperor, and Alan is there, and he's got words to throw at you. So yeah, it's good. It's fun.
Yeah, anytime someone mentions Marcus Aurelius, there's just a man in Florida just swinging at nothing, just in the air.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. It's great. I love it.
Now that I mentioned, I guess Alan does know a little bit about Roman history. I guess just a teeny bit.
A little. I mean, he's probably fairly knowledgeable sometimes. I think that he's got these yellow note cards of some sort,
We of course love Alan and love making
We
him
do.
use caps lock in the chat as he is threatening to mail me anthrax right now. Which
Hi,
is,
Alan.
it's going to be interesting when his channel gets banned. It'll be. And then who's going to do more KJ Parker reviews? Oh, no.
Oh, I know. I don't want to be the downfall of Alan. That would be so upsetting for all booktube.
Be very Roman of you.
I mean, it would be very strategic if I wanted to be the only booktuber to talk about it. But alas, I'm very happy to have other people that want to talk about it too. So I want to keep Alan around.
Yes, I think we all would like to have Alan around. I was actually getting some reading done while he was running sprints earlier. I never run sprints, but I always am in sprints. So like I'm always watching other people's do it. And my favorite thing in the world is whenever people check out reading sprints for the first time, they go, "What is happening?
Yeah.
Why is everyone quiet?" Because it's the exact same, approach I took to it at first. Like,
Yeah,
did they know they're on screen? This is very strange.
exactly.
When did you first hear about reading sprints?
It was one of Alan's, and I feel like it was about 7 months ago, maybe. And the same thing happened that my husband walked into the room and he was like, "Are you just watching people do nothing on TV right now?" And I was like, "No, like we're all actively doing stuff collectively, but also apart." And he was like, "This makes no sense." And then sat down and also started working on the sprint. And I was like, "See, now we're all part of the sprint collective." So we now actually do writing sprints in our writing group, my husband and I, but we don't do them live on YouTube. But yeah, I agree. They're very odd the first time that you encounter one.
Yeah, it is extremely odd, and then like you kind of look forward to them. Like I was playing some of as Alan would call it, Dat Madden, which by the way, folks, it has nothing to do with fantasy, but Madden is a horrendous franchise and a horrendous game, and EA should be shot into the sun for the version of Madden they released this year. But I'm still playing it and paid $80 for it because I'm an idiot. But I was playing Madden, wasting my life away, cursing EA in my 80th season of Madden, and I saw Alan went live with some sprints, and I was like, you know what? I should read. I should actually
There
do
you
something.
go. Yeah. The thing is that I find a lot of the time I've become a real grandma in the last few years, and so many of them start late. And I'm like, it's bedtime, guys. It is not time to be reading or getting work done because I'm not that person who gets into bed and starts reading a book and gets tired. I'm that person that then goes, I'm staying up till 3 a.m. to finish the book because it's so good now. So it's just never the right time for me. But Alan thankfully kind of doesn't mix. So that works out better.
He's always the wild card. I mean, he's even catching strays from one of the nicest guys I've ever met, which was the last episode's guest, Jared Henderson. He said, "Good evening,
I did
good
watch.
evening. Glad to
Yeah.
see a guest who isn't Alan."
Happy to oblige, Jared.
Oh my goodness, the poor guy. It just Alan is always like at least somewhat in an episode, even whenever he's not in the episode. Which
I kind of always anticipate he'll show up in Chatting with Nuts and then why read? I'm like, there will at some point be a blip of Alan. So it's kind of like a cameo appearance that I'm always looking forward to. I'm like, it's going to happen. It's just when will it happen?
that's
And
right.
it's always good.
Oh my goodness. I've been reading some good stuff lately, but I was curious, what are you reading? Are you filming any reading vlogs right now? I've been really enjoying watching those.
Oh, thank you. I am in the middle of 2 books. So I am reading A Song for Our Bun right now to have that chat with Joanna, Josh, and Jake on Sunday. I am the slowest one in that group. I feel so bad. Joanna's been done for like a month, but I have been super behind. And I am a third done Oathbringer. So yes, I have put that one to the side though for the last few days because I've really been trying to finish Song for Our Fun before Sunday. I promised Joanna I will be finished. And yeah, that's basically what I've been reading as of right now. What are you reading?
I'm reading Slade House by David Mitchell, which is kind of like loosely tied into the Bone Clocks, which I just finished earlier in the week that I
Yeah.
absolutely loved.
Mhm.
Can't speak highly enough of it. I'm reading the Lathe of Heaven
Okay.
by Ursula K. Le Guin, and
Mm.
that was basically because Jared actually recommended it in the last episode. He was like, "You would probably really like this," kind of in that Philip K. Dick area of sci-fi.
Yeah.
And then Gwen actually said that she took inspiration from him for that book, and I'm only a little bit into that, but I'm really liking it as well. And then I'm also reading book 2 in Otherland, and it's going.
I
It's
hear you.
going. Yeah, it's book 1 was largely meandering and full
Oh,
of really crazy ideas, and maybe not ideas, but situations and just really interesting things, I thought. But Tad is very long-winded, and I was okay with that in book 1, but book 2, I'm about halfway through, and I still don't know what's happening. Like, I still have no idea where the story's going, and I'm like,
yeah.
this is a lot. Like this is quite a lot. And it's also not like my favorite type of story anyways.
Mhm.
With Memory Star and Thorn, it was a little bit easier for me because I love the setting. I love, this
Yeah.
classical fantasy setting. So I'm a little bit bummed right now with Otherland Book 2. It's not that I dislike it, but it just hasn't gotten there yet for me.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's another book I'm reading, and I hesitate to even talk about it because I don't think I'm going to finish it. But
Okay.
maybe I will. I don't know. It's not because I don't like it, but because it's just such a commitment. And that's
Mhm.
House of Leaves
Mm.
by an author I can't remember. Have you ever heard of House of Leaves? Have you ever looked into this thing?
I have not. No. Is this a lengthy book?
Not only is it lengthy, but it's like an interactive text. And what I mean by
Ooh.
that is that there are footnotes from like three different people. So okay, check this out. It's a book about it's a book about a book written about a documentary that was found not by the original author, but by a kid that went into the dead author's house and has taken this and added his own footnotes to it. And I'm only 60 pages in, but I think he's having a psychotic break. And I'm just like, it's the weirdest thing. So there's parts of this book where the stuff is written backwards and
Oh,
upside down. Like you have to, there's no audiobook. You have to read it physically.
yeah.
And um, I don't know. It is so captivating, but like
Yeah, and weird.
at the same time, I've never read anything. I don't know. I just don't know if I'll finish it. Like I have no idea if I
Mhm.
have the stamina for that type of book. And for
I
no
love a
reason,
weird book or a different book. Like, it's one of those things that if it's super non-conventional, I'll usually give it a go and see if I like it, but I don't DNF things. Like, it's really difficult for me to DNF things. So, I don't know if that's the same for you. I'm that person that, like, I'll be on the 90th part of the book and I'm like, it might get good in the last 10% of this book. Like, I won't know unless I finish it. So, I have to see my commitments through.
I used to feel like that, and now I don't. And I think one of the things that kind of broke me about it is the fact that I have so many open series. Like I literally have like 30 or 40 series that I've
That's a
started.
lot.
And I've just come to the conclusion I'm not going to finish most of them. Most likely, it's not even really a DNF. It's just like
Yeah.
coming to terms with reality because like that hole in the ground's calling me. Like I can feel it. It's coming. Uh, is that morbid? That's a little
I
morbid, isn't
mean,
it?
it could be, but we're in that time of the year, right? Everything's dying around us. So, it just fits thematically.
It's thematically, I love it. I just read Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. Coetzee. It's hard to say. I don't know how to say his name. I've listened to him say his name and I still can't say it. But Disgrace has put me in all of the downer mood. Like it is just sort of
Oh,
the most tragic. It is the most tragic book I've ever read. One of the best books I've ever read, but I don't recommend it.
no, I have a hard time with tragic and sad books. Like it's not my thing. It's the same with movies. I just don't want to spend my time that way generally. Joanna and I did the
Hmm.
Finally Fall book tag together, and one of the questions I think was like, "What's the saddest book you've read?" or something. And I sat there and I thought about it, and I was like, "It's a book I read in high school because I've actively avoided sad books up until like from that point on because I just don't want to engage with that." Um, but I mean, there's sad parts of fantasy. It's just when a whole book is sad, I don't,
You
that's
don't
not my,
really get. You don't go for that vibe.
no, it's not for me. It's just not.
Do you think that do you ever have moves where you feel like you could be? Or is it, like, pretty consistent that you would never want to? Because for me, I have a wide palette. Sometimes I
Yeah.
can read Legends and Lattes, and other times I'm reading, R. Scott Baker, tell me about
Right.
eating
I feel
people.
like it can vary. I'm a really big mood reader. I learned very quickly on my channel that I couldn't do TBRs because I would put out a TBR video and then I would read nothing in that because I just didn't feel like reading any of those things. So
Mhm.
I think occasionally I tried out Cozy Fantasy this past year. I read Legends and Lattes and I read A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. And it's not the subgenre for me, I've learned. Like it's fine. I did enjoy Legends and Lattes. It's just not something I think I'll read again. Um, I've learned though over the past year that my mood generally so far tends to swing between wanting to read epic and grimdark fantasy
Mhm.
to satirical and historical fiction. Like those tend to be that's the pendulum for me for the most
Okay.
part. Um but I love history books. Like I will be that person that I'm like, oh, a history book. And it's just like I get really excited about footnotes in a history book.
You like footnotes?
I do. I
I
mean,
don't
I
like
do.
footnotes.
So, I
I'm
mean, I
that
don't love it
person.
in like a fantasy book. I probably wouldn't like it, but in a history book, but I'm like, oh, there's more information. Excellent. So I get more excited about that.
I just read a little book called 100 Ways to Improve Your Writing. It's pretty famous, I think. It's like a little pocket book that you can have
Yeah.
because I like to read books about writing to help me think about what I'm reading. And
Mhm.
then I also like to pretend like one day I'll write something. But I just I laughed because one of the things says ways to make your readers not hate you, and one of them was don't use footnotes. And I just thought of Terry Pratchett immediately. Like I was like, well,
Mhm.
Terry Pratchett would disagree for
Yeah,
sure.
100%. I mean, I get it. A lot of people probably don't wanna do that, but it also kind of makes me think of when you were a kid and you had those choose your own adventure books, and you would do that through the footnotes, and that was kind of fun. So, yeah, Jared's the same. I love digging through a footnote. You're gonna find some really interesting tidbits in there usually, at least in academic circles, like, the things that people hide in footnotes is usually pretty amazing. So, I always would go for the footnotes first and then read the actual portion.
I wonder if you may enjoy House of Leaves because a lot of it is like based on the footnotes and who's
Yeah,
making the footnote. And then
maybe.
there's 3 appendixes in the back that they reference. And then
Mhm.
there's like a catalog of pictures that you can look at too. So like a lot of people say when you read House of Leaves, it helps a lot if you've done academic reading because
Yeah.
you read the book about the documentary is actually extreme. It feels like academic. And
Mhm.
then the footnotes from the guy who has found the book is like, oh, I mean, he's losing his mind. I mean, essentially. So, like, that part is very, like, contemporary fiction novel, but the
Yeah,
actual book itself that it's talking about is that. So, hey, maybe you would enjoy it. I don't know.
maybe. It might be a 2024 thing that I look into. Who knows? We'll see. There's certain I keep telling people there's series and things that I'm definitely planning on getting to in 2024, and I feel like that list just keeps growing and growing, and I'm like, eventually
Oh,
I'm
you're
gonna have to
falling
start
into the
tapping these.
booktube pitfall. You just gotta quit. You can't commit to anything.
And
I'm
that's the
giving you
thing, like, I am probably the worst person for a buddy read, as Joanna can now probably confirm, because it'll be like a month later and I'm like, "I haven't started it yet. I'm so sorry." And I just keep finding new things I wanna read, which is so exhausting. But there's so many good things, so it's hard to say no.
well, to add to your list, David Sloan wants to know if you've read Catch-22.
I have not, but I will if it is satirical and historical. I do like those things. I have heard good things about Catch 22. So, but yeah, again, it's just one of those things that'll be on my list, the never ending list. But I
I
mean, if you're right and we're all going to be in the ground soon, why bother? Just why
No, 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 no. It should be a motivator to get things done before you enter
I mean, you
in.
could go one of two ways with that, right? You read everything or you just decide you're done at this very moment. So there's two options.
Yeah, and honestly, depending on the day, you can do either, right?
You
Some
can.
days
You
I'm
can
like,
do
"I
both
gotta."
in one day, honestly.
Every now and then when I'm sad, I just go, "You know what? It doesn't really matter anyways, because it's coming to a close, folks."
Yeah, I like to think sometimes I'm like, "You're just this little speck of nothing on a ball floating in space that no one knows about." And I'm like, "The problem doesn't really matter anymore." And then I just move on. So, yeah, it's weird. It's all your perspective.
It is. It certainly is, and, that perspective can, like, sift into reading. I'm just so, interested in what you are looking for in books, right now, because you're saying that your focus is kinda shifting. You don't like the absurdly sad stuff. You didn't, like, love the experience of, like, the subgenre of cozy fantasy. So,
No.
like, what are you looking to get out of your books right now?
So the biggest hits for me this year, the best trilogy I read was First Law. I fell in love with First Law so much. I love Joe Abercrombie. His style of humor is exactly my style of humor. It's dark and I
Mhm.
appreciate it so much. Glocta is a man after my own heart. I loved him from the second he was on the page. So I'm looking to do the standalones and then the Age of Madness trilogy. Like that's definitely upcoming for me. I've been told by many people that they think Malazan and I will be a good hit with each other. So I'm curious. I'm going to try it in January, I think. That's my tentative goal. I really, in terms of historical fiction, Bernard Cornwell tends to be one of my preferred people. So I'm going to look at the Arthurian trilogy coming up pretty soon as well. But lately, I've been in a really big Sanderson kick. Like
That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, I've taken the year of Sanderson very literally. And I've
How are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, like 14 or 15 Cosmere books since December 25th of last year. So it's a lot. My goal was to finish the whole Cosmere by January. I don't know if I'm going to, just because Oathbringer is taking me a really long time. So yeah, I'll probably need a break from Sanderson coming up pretty soon. So I don't know.
Well, there's so much to unpack there, and I have so many questions for you.
Please proceed. I have so many answers to give you.
Well, one thing I've heard kind of thrown around about Bernard Cornwell, and I would love to hear your take on this because you're someone who's actually versed in the subject, is historical accuracy. Is that really important to you when it comes to historical fiction?
Yes, I'm very nitpicky about it, unfortunately. I kind of wish I wasn't. I get a little obnoxious with that stuff. Like my husband doesn't even want to watch documentaries and stuff with me anymore because I'll sit there and I'm like, that's wrong. That's wrong. And I get really irritated. Like few things bother me more than the spreading of false information. It's my like biggest irritant. So when stuff is not accurate, it can bother me. I understand it's fiction and I have to be a little less picky about it. But I was talking with Alan about this, and we were saying, I think in the Augustus chat, that Cleopatra basically gets like a retelling every year, and none of them are ever correct, and they're all just really bad. And it's like, why? Why do you keep doing this? So I don't know. Yeah, to summarize, I'm picky about it if it's not clear.
Yeah, I feel like I would feel that way if I read things that are in my expertise, but luckily no one writes anything in my expertise because I have so few. So that actually helps not being an academic at all. But I was just curious because I've heard people say Bernard Cornwell is a little loose with some of his stuff, but you've read him before and you found it suitable.
So I feel like his Saxon Chronicles is pretty good. I haven't had really any major issues with it. I mean, obviously he's taken some liberties with kind of throwing people into the mix. But a lot of the people that he writes about historically, we know about. The locations are all accurate. The battles that took place are accurate. I can't talk about that documentary, Alan. So I liked the Saxon Chronicles series. I thought he did a good job with that. I felt it was well researched. It just had enough balance of everything for me to make it work. But yeah, I thought it was a good story, so I was good with that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the show. I haven't read any of the
show is so good. Can we talk
Okay, I was nervous. I was very nervous that you weren't going to like it.
No. So we came to the show before the books, and I don't know if you ever saw the trailer for season 1. It was one of the worst looking trailers for anything I had ever seen.
I still tell people that season 1, like you kind of get through it. I liked it, but
I love it.
A lot of people don't like season 1.
Well, they're wrong because season 1 is excellent. The first episode is so good. But we saw the trailer for this show, and it was on BBC at the time, and I am a big Doctor Who fan. So my husband had to endure a lot of really terrible commercials on BBC. And when they started putting the advertisements for Last Kingdom, we were like, that looks terrible. We will never watch that. And then at that point, we weren't married. I lived in Canada. I was doing my schooling up there. My husband was in the US, and I hadn't heard from him in like 7 or 8 hours, which was an unnatural amount of time for us to not communicate with each other. And I finally texted him and was like, are you okay? And he's like, we were so wrong about that show. It's so good. He binged the whole show. that day. And then when I saw him the next time, we ended up watching it again, and we've rewatched it probably like 10 times. We absolutely love it. It's one of our all-time favorite shows. It's so
I never
good.
watched the final season, and I haven't watched the movie because I do this weird thing where like I don't like shows to end, so I will just not watch the endings.
It's fine because it's not great, honestly.
I've heard it's pretty suspect.
The final season is fine. That movie I have major issues with. A lot of unnecessary things happened. Yeah, it just was not good. So we usually rewatch the first 2 seasons because we love the antagonists of the first 2 seasons. And then we're like, that was great. Let's do that again in another 8 or 9 months. It kind of ends up being the rotation that we go with.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever watch the final season or the movie, just because I don't feel compelled to do so. The only person I know other than me that just purposely doesn't finish things is Murphy. Murphy does not finish things. Like, she's just like me. She would rather it be like open ended, like it's still going on. And
Yeah.
It's a very odd thing that I do. Specifically, I mean, I would do it with books too if I didn't have a channel, probably like series wise. But with TV specifically, I never seem to care too much.
I guess that makes you the perfect Game of Thrones fan, right? Or a Song of Ice and Fire fan, because you're just kind of here and you're like, I'm happy with the story we've been given, and it's fine. So
I rewatched Tyrion's trial scene the other day. It is literally some of the greatest television ever made.
So good.
And it's lifted right from the book. Like, that's the crazy thing.
So much of that first few seasons is taken verbatim from the book, especially the first season. And that's why it's just such good television. And then, as we know, it goes off the rails just a bit.
Just a wee bit.
But yeah, that scene I loved. Who was I talking to about this the other day? It was Christopher Navo. I don't know if he's in the chat, but we were saying that my husband and I loved Oberyn so much that when we were pregnant, we're like, if it's a boy, maybe Oberyn is a name. We were like, he's a great character. And the scene with him going into Tyrion's cell to speak to him in the show is like clutch. It's so good. I loved it.
So well done. But the first massive era of the show comes directly just a few scenes after that, unfortunately, which I won't spoil for anybody, but big diversion there. Also, Gavin Reads It All says, I never make typos, which I thought was very funny. So I wanted to highlight it. Also, this is How to Train Your Gavin. He has renamed his channel to Gavin Reads It All because it's more accurate to his stuff. And folks, if you haven't checked out Gavin's channel, I highly recommend it. I'm a big fan. He's a fellow One Piece reader like myself. Jake Bishop chimed in and said, Jimmy, think of how you felt when Sanderson had lap press and Yumi, but like they are trying to be accurate. It's the entire setting. Kind of talking about me not having an expertise and getting upset. This is actually a good point. I mean, I absolutely hated the meathead segments in Yumi. I thought it was so poorly done.
I didn't like it either. So I have not yet read Secret Project 2, and I haven't read Secret Project 4 because 4 needs to basically be read after all of Stormlight from what I've seen. I got into Tress immediately. I really enjoyed it. And Yumi took me a long time because of those meathead scenes. The humor really missed for me in that book. But the artwork was beautiful. So yeah, there were pros and cons to Yumi.
Yeah, there's certainly no art, at least in my mind, there's no argument that the presentation of the secret projects are some of the coolest I've seen. So I just got Sunlit Man, which I'm saying the titles, folks. So if you think they're spoilers, I'm sorry. But Sunlit Man, I have it. And I actually didn't think it looked that impressive online when people were posting it. But when you get it in person, it's like
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a crazy cool looking book. Yumi for me started out really strong. And then in the middle, the middle, I mean, I had to dig deep. Like I was like, I gotta go through this. I gotta go through it.
An interesting experience, and Kyle was laughing at me about it. From Read by Kyle, because I had just finished reading Lions of Alrasan, which, as you know, if you've read it, is some of the most beautiful prose. And I then picked up Yumi and was like, what is wrong with this book? And Kyle was like, you cannot compare Guy Gabriel Kay's prose to Sanderson's prose. And I was like, oh, that might be exactly what's happening. And once I detached myself from that, it got a lot better. But yeah, it was an interesting experience.
I definitely wish I would have done Yumi on audio, but I'm trying to
Mhm.
not listen to Kate Redding or Michael Kramer for like the next 6 years because I've listened to way too many hours of Kramer. I'm excited that the fourth one is narrated by someone else who is actually
Heard
on.
mixed reviews.
Oh, wait, I'll be honest. If it's not Kramer, I'm happy. And I don't hate Kramer, by the way. I can't listen to him anymore. Like I
He is
just.
fine. I feel like it's taken me a little while to get used to him because his voice is very monotone a lot of the time, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay." Um, because I didn't really listen to audiobooks all that much. The first one that I really got excited about was First Law because Stephen Pacey is just a gem of a narrator. And I was like, well, everyone should narrate like Stephen Pacey. And then when you go from that to Michael Kramer, who is good, he does his job well. It's just a very big difference between
Kaladin
the two.
looked at the spear like, okay, man, maybe put some oomph behind it. No.
Exactly. A little bit would be nice. And also I find it odd now because I've listened to some of the audiobooks for Wheel of Time and the voices are repeating for characters that I've distinguished that as the voice for that character in my head. And I'm like, oh, but that's Niney.
Yeah, I have
That can't be
Kramer
they.
as Wheel of Time in my head.
Yeah.
He's Rand,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly. It's awkward when you kind of start associating voices with people and then they
What
do
are
other
those women doing over there? I can't understand them, which is
I'm gonna
essentially
be with all three of them. Mm.
beggars can't be choosers.
Yes.
I don't think he ever says that. Jared says GGK makes everybody seem like a poor prose stylist,
It's
so that's
very
definitely not
true.
helping Sanderson. The most interesting thing is like listening to Sanderson talk about Guy Gavriel K. He has so much respect for
He
him
loves
and his
him, yeah.
writing. Yeah, so I think even Sanderson would probably agree that when it comes to style,
Yeah.
that GGK is among the best. Hard to compare when it comes to GGK. Is style a big thing for you?
It wasn't, honestly. I don't think it is still now either. I don't know. I'm not as picky as I am with historical accuracy. I feel like all my pickiness kind of goes into that one particular thing, and then I'm pretty lax with everything else. But my I've never really been particularly upset by it or choosy about it. Honestly, if characters are interesting, that generally is what wins me over. But like when you do read GGK, it's hard not to be drawn in by his style and prose.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess it really just depends on the author. How about you?
Yeah, it's pretty big for me, and I think it's probably a bigger deal for people than they realize. Like in general, it can be like a very
Probably.
unconscious thing. But for instance, when I was reading Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee, it was like I couldn't believe just how simple uh, he was stating things, but the punch behind those words. Better Than Food said he wields his pen like a knife, like a sharp
Hmm.
knife, and I couldn't agree any
Yeah.
more with that assessment. And to me, there's something about that that makes books immersive and evocative and effective.
Hmm.
But it also just depends on what you're looking for.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
I'm not somebody that associates great prose with purple prose or
Yeah.
flowery
Me either.
writing. I think that there's a lot more to it than that.
Oh yeah.
There's a whole lot more to it. So I think it does matter to me. I think I'd be a liar to say it doesn't, and then I don't look for it. Like Sanderson has a lot of habits in his writing that do
Yes.
drive me absolutely insane.
Undulating. So much undulating.
I prefer it on audio,
Yeah.
if I can do it that way. So, Oki says, "Get Better Than Food" on here. I'm trying. It's in the works, so stay tuned. That would be a super fun episode. I love his videos, but yeah, I think it does matter to me, and
Yeah. Now that if when you're kind of phrasing it like that, I would agree. There are certain character or certain writers too. I feel like Martin does that really, really well. Joanna and I were talking about this a little while ago, and I was saying to her, I don't know if there's an author more so than Martin that I feel like every word is important, but it's not like stylistically he's writing in a way that is unapproachable to people. It's super approachable, but everything is important and everything is really beautifully done. So in terms of that kind of style, like I live for that.
yeah,
So
I think that's definitely style, right? Like that
yeah.
is right. It's a craft thing, and my favorite authors are the one that are telling a story with the words they're not putting on the page. Those are literally
Exactly.
my favorite authors. And Gene Wolfe would be one that I would say he's probably the GOAT when it comes to this. He is so good at telling a story without the words on the page. It's
Hmm.
actually overwhelming at times. Like I hear people say that Erickson is show don't tell to the extreme. Well,
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Gene Wolfe is the extreme version of like, what are you not saying? Like that
Hmm.
is him to a T. And I need to get to that third book of that. So yeah, I just think that, when it comes to writing style, it it can be as simple as thinking about like what words are they using, but
Yeah.
where they place words, why they chose that word,
Right.
diction, like that stuff really does end up mattering. You said that you like characters, and I'm always super curious about this, especially recently that I've been reading a lot more problematic POVs, and that seems a lot different in the fantasy circles, or I should just say genre fiction in general. But like whenever you're saying that you're looking for like those good characters, are you looking for someone that you want to emulate, that you can look
No,
to, or
no.
are you kind of drawn to those problematic POVs?
I love a problematic POV. I've always loved a problematic POV. I mean, my my gateway drug to books as a kid was Harry Potter. Like that was the one that I went back to over and over again. So I mean, as a kid, I was like, good people win. Yay. And like that was really lovely.
Mhm.
But when I transitioned to adult fantasy and started reading A Song of Ice and Fire, I was like, the more interesting characters are the classified bad people. And when I started reading Neil Gaiman, when I read American Gods, like Shadow's fine. I like Wednesday 1,000 times better. Like those are the characters that I am really interested in. When I read First Law, loved Glocta like off the bat because it's a way that you can understand an absurdist and extreme character and enjoy them, but you don't have to know them in real life or like them in real life. So it makes it more interesting, I feel like. But yeah, I never really want to generally emulate any of the characters that I'm super rooting for. Except I will say the one character that I have read as of late that I'm like, yes, I would definitely be friends with this person is Yasna from Stormlight. So that that's probably where I've drawn that line. But for the most part, no, I would not want to associate or be anything like these people. How about you?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I would say it's always that I want to have a POV that I disagree with, but I think the ones that stick with me the longest are the ones that I generally have a problem with,
Hmm.
and find myself arguing with. I mean, probably the biggest example of this is actually Hadrian from Sun Eater. Like I don't like Hadrian from Sun Eater. Like I don't agree with almost anything he says past book one. Like he actually actively angers me,
Hmm.
but because of that, it's an exercise in testing my bounds
Hmm.
and seeing things from a totally different perspective, I guess
Yeah,
is the way to kind of go about it. And it just depends on why you read, right? I mean, there's some people
sure.
who read and they do want their best friends in the text, and they do
Yeah,
want to have someone that they maybe could emulate and see themselves in, or to say like, what would Logan Nine Fingers do in this instance?
right.
Probably murder everyone.
Probably murder everyone, get really ragey, and then forget about it.
Folks,
And then
sometimes violence is the answer. That's what
I
we're trying to
mean,
say
a
here.
lot of the time in fantasy, I think violence is the answer. But
Well,
yeah, it's kind of we as people, right, have always gravitated to that idea that we want to see ourselves in characters. I mean, I think that's why the hero's journey exists and has existed for thousands of years because we want to be able to escape our life, go on this grand quest, and kind of be given a reward at the end. And you go, yeah, I did a really turbulent and troublesome thing. I survived and I was rewarded. And a lot of the time for people that could be getting through a Monday and you're like getting a reward at the end of this day would be really, really nice. But it's, it's interesting that we keep kind of returning back to these themes over and over. And we do see a lot of that in fantasy, but it has been interesting in the last few decades to kind of see how we've been sort of shifting to that anti hero perspective and offering sometimes both of those within the same narrative. You can have a hero and an anti-hero's journey in the same story, and you can relate or not relate with one or both of the characters. And I find that really enjoyable.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the anti-hero usually seems to change the flavor of a book if there's
Yeah.
multiple POVs. It's like people will identify the work with the anti-hero. And a really good example of this is A Song of Ice and Fire when people, will claim that it's very nihilistic and grimdark
Hmm.
and all this stuff. But there's a massive amount of POVs that are extraordinarily hopeful and inspiring
Oh
and
yeah.
overcoming odds. Samuel Tarley,
Oh, big
Brandon
time.
Tarth, and then obviously Davos, who is a man struggling with
Love
this
Davos so much.
yeah, the responsibility and the duty of serving your king who has basically made you,
Hmm.
as well as trying to be a distant husband and a good father, who's
Father, yeah.
also fighting a, spiritual battle of
Hmm.
what do all these gods and religions mean? Did the mother really save me on that rock after Blackwater? We're not sure.
Right? Exactly.
And Davos likely will have an arc in the book where he probably will never know the answer to that question, which could end up being the arc for many of us as well. So it's interesting though, because people will talk about the Jamies and the Cerseis and Tyrions, but there's a lot of just straight up, in my opinion, heroes in that series as well. But
Oh
the
yeah.
anti-hero kind of overshadows it, and then it's casted into that light because of the inclusion of that type of character. It's
Oh yeah.
interesting.
100%. I mean, Martin gets a lot of flack for his treatment of women, and I feel like this has really been blown out of proportion a lot of the time because it gets conflated with the show. And I say to people, I'm like, please read the books, because when you do, you can see that he is such a nuanced author with female characters and perspectives. And I remember when I read Brienne for the first time thinking, this is so relatable to any girl that has ever felt uncomfortable in her body. Like,
Hmm.
it's so, so relatable. And for any girl that has never felt like she fits in with the girly girls, when she then doesn't fit in with the guy, she's kind of in this ambiguous middle space. I was like, this is a hero to them. Like, this is such a good character. And I'm so glad she exists. And then, of course, you have the other female characters, when some of them like an anti-hero like a Cersei, and then you have everyone that loves Arya and screams that from their soapbox that they love Arya so much. But it's such a nuanced book because you have, or series rather, because you have all these different perspectives, and so many of the secondary characters in that series offer such unique perspectives on that hero's journey. And it's, for some characters, even the more central characters, it's not your traditional hero's journey, but it's this redemptive arc that's so fascinating. Like, Jamie is my favorite character because he's so well done. Because in the beginning, you think one way about him, and as the story progresses, at least I did, I completely changed my feelings on him. But my husband's favorite character is Theon, and I'm like, that's not your typical choice at
No, no,
all.
not at all, but I mean, I
No,
I would actually maybe possibly agree with that. I think that his arc is, pretty incredible
it is. And you get
overall.
so many of them. Yeah, there's so many good offerings in that series. I love it. So, we could
Yeah,
talk
I
about
I
that for like 2 hours.
I like what Daniel said here. Actually, before I do that, I also wanted to highlight, Jared's comment. Said, "Reading builds empathy, and one of the best ways to do that is to have characters we don't personally like." And, this
100%.
is, like, one of the reasons that I do read, from POVs that I absolutely can't stand because I like to kinda test myself at times.
Yes.
Daniel says, I think there are some valid criticisms with Gurm, like any author, right? But there are times that people aren't able to discern between depiction and endorsement, like
Yeah.
the relatability problem with it. Yeah. So portrayal is not an endorsement.
Yeah.
Man, my friend Amanda had a really good saying about it. Um, and I can't remember exactly what it was. It was something about portrayal does not equal promotion is what she said, I think. And I love that because when I was reading Disgrace, I had a hard time with it. I mean, and if you go look at the 1-star reviews, you will see that a lot of people will claim that this book hates women because it's extraordinarily brutal.
Hmm.
Um, because it's written from a POV of a professor who sleeps with a student that is absolutely just horrendous,
Yeah.
terrible, the way he looks at the world. And a lot of that is reflected in how he actually views himself too. So, I mean, he's an extraordinarily problematic POV.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how, and of course, being in the fantasy sphere for a lot of the conversations that I'm in, I'm thinking like this POV included in a fantasy story. I don't think would go over too hot on, something like BookTube or Book Talk.
Probably
But
not.
I kind of broadened this out after talking about this with people in my Discord, and it was like, I don't necessarily think that it's actually like a fantasy and sci-fi problem. It's not even a genre fiction problem. It's just like kind of like internet discourse
Yeah.
in general. And I feel like there's this urge or maybe want of people to be able to kind of hold up their hand and be like, this is bad. Give me a cookie.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
100%.
we're aware that it is
It's
uncomfortable and
not
that
good.
yeah, like no one's under the illusion that this is a good thing. And
Yeah.
I think just like, for someone like Coetzee, he won the Nobel Prize. He won the Booker twice, which is an extremely rare thing. So
Yeah.
obviously people are seeing what he's doing and understanding what he's doing.
Right.
I just wonder if it was in the fantasy section or the horror section or whatever it was, and it became a big blow up on, I just wonder maybe this book will become a big TikTok sensation one day and people look at
Maybe.
it and then I think people might take it as if J.M. Coetzee himself is misogynistic or whatever else, which is not the case at all, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets really complicated, right? Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of the time people also will associate one specific character that dictates the personal views of the author. And I'm like, no, no. They're allowed to write complex and complicated characters and not feel that way themselves and not be that way themselves. That's what writing is a lot of the time. And I think that we kind of get caught up in that because we live in a time where everything is so accessible. And it used to be, right? You would go to the bookstore and you didn't know anything about the author
Mhm.
and you would kind of just pick up a book. And now people actively research before they buy something from an author, or they will buy one book and before they buy anything else, they do like a deep dive on that person. And they're like, well, we don't agree on XYZ morally and spiritually and financially, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to support this person. And I'm going to get on my soapbox and tell everyone else why they shouldn't support them either. And I'm like, okay. But it's something that has definitely changed, I feel like, in the last few years. And I think maybe we're more exposed to it because of the fact that we are on BookTube. Some people are on Book Talk. I don't use TikTok. I know nothing about it. But I hear that Book Talk is a thing. It's- yeah, it's different. It's a strange time to be a book reader, I feel like.
Yeah, I just obviously there are things that can be included in books or done in a certain way that might not be tasteful
Yes.
or the execution of it. But I think that there's like this kind of jump to the gun to be like, hey, Severian's misogynistic in Book of the New Sun, and I'm like, yeah, he is. He really is, and
Right?
he describes all the female characters extremely sexual, and I'm like, yeah, he does. He absolutely does. And there is the problem, especially in fantasy, of like the male gaze, right? And just describing every woman the same exact way. I mean, we've,
Yes.
we've all seen it, right? So I just think that knowing what perspective you're reading from and the intention behind it, and I am always in good faith, not actually associating those views with the author, or at
Yeah.
least I try to, unless if I have some other sort of context or information that maybe other people aren't privy to or whatever. So
Right. Yeah. I
so
do
that
find
was
it
something a
interesting
lot.
though, like if I feel like certain authors, Sanderson is just going to be my go-to with this because of the fact that I basically read only Sanderson this year. But I find it so interesting because it's no secret if you know anything about him that he's quite religious and he doesn't shy away from talking about it and he's very public about it. And I find it so fascinating that he writes really interesting religions in his books. And he's also written characters that are very atheist and writes them exceptionally well. And I'm like, that's so interesting to me.
I'm a little nervous what he's going to do with his atheistic character.
Yeah, a little
Uh,
bit.
but you
So
know what? I'm willing to hear him out
exactly.
because
But
people
it's
do change and morph over time. So
right, exactly. But I find that fascinating. Like when you do know something about an author and they can surprise you with it in a positive way. Like that for me has been a really enjoyable reading experience with
mhm.
Sanderson. Because I like religion and fantasy. So for me it's a boon. I know that might not be the case for everybody.
Reading with Rebecca Nicole, which by the way, I really enjoy Rebecca's channel. She deserves way more subs than she has. So people go out
It's a
and
great
support her,
channel.
please. She said, I think this is more of a problem of the internet. I don't think the vast majority of readers are constantly looking up things. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was saying.
100%.
It's a
Yeah.
symptom of a bigger thing. I'm not going to sit here and be like, hey, fantasy, we need to get it together.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
no.
that.
That is the internet.
Yeah, and is definitely not you know, you're not able to diagnose an entire generation of readers that way
No.
either. So we always want to be careful to do that. So you're reading Sanderson, and I do want to come back to the religion and fantasy thing. Uh,
Yeah.
you didn't love Way of Kings. You had some problems with it, right?
I had so many problems with Way of Kings. Oh my god.
But
How
you
much
love
time
Words
do
of
you have?
Radiance.
It was so good. This is the weirdest reading experience of my life, probably. I had just finished. So I told my husband last year, I was like, I want to get Mistborn for Christmas. Because like we had really started getting into booktube last year.
Mhm.
And I kept seeing Mistborn is like the best trilogy of like new fantasy, whatever. And I was like, fine, I'll read it and I'll see what I think. Please get me this for Christmas. I inhaled it in probably like 6 days, the whole trilogy. It was just done. And I was like, that was enjoyable. What's next? So I read Elantris next. It was fine. I liked it decently enough. Read Warbreaker. Loved it
Great
so
magic
much.
system. Great magic system.
It's still to date my favorite Sanderson book. I absolutely loved Warbreaker. And I was then like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to jump into the Stormlight Archive. I bought all 4 books. I was so excited. I opened Way of Kings and read the prologue and was like, what is this? It's just like so many names, so much information. There was way too many capitalized nouns in like 4 pages. I was like, this is really throwing people in immediately. And then I got to the second prologue and I was like, what is
There's 2
happening with
prologues?
this book? I was so confused. And I was like, okay, I'll give it time. I'll get through it. I'll see what happens. At the time I had not listened to the audiobook, so I say the names the way that I read the names. So I know that it's Shalon. I call her Shalon. That's just how we are. And Shalon for me was the most irritating character that I had ever read in that book. I was like, there is nothing likable about this character. She's infuriating. She's nowhere near as smart as she thinks she is. And Yasna, who is smart, is placating her. Like, why is she doing this?
I am a Shalon defender.
So we'll get to that, Jimmy. We'll
All
get
right,
there.
all right.
But that for me really tarnished that book. I had a really difficult time with getting through it. I didn't like Adolin a lot of the time. I found that the Bridge 4 stuff I was there for. I was like, this is super fascinating. Getting into the psychological aspects of the people in Bridge 4 I thought was really, really good. Dalinar grew on me as the story went on, and I was like, it's fine. It's fine. Yes, Jared, thank you. And then we got to the end of the book, and I was like, it was fine. And I then didn't look at it for about from February or March until last month, and was like, okay, I'll pick it up. It's been like a million years. I don't know how much I remember from the last book. We'll get into it. And was hooked from the prologue. It was like night and day in terms of the quality of writing. I felt like between book 1 and book 2, Sanderson really found his voice as an author. Like I felt the quality of the writing improved. The characters themselves, Shalon, I thought was so interesting in Words of Radiance. I was like, this is a complete 180 for me. It was weird. And yeah, there was just like, I don't want to give spoilers away because so much of that book is so good, but there were scenes in that book. My husband had zero context for this because he has not read it. And I just was talking at him for like a straight 30 minutes because I was like, I have to talk to someone about what I just read because it's so good. And I felt that way pretty much from start to finish, which is impressive for an 1,100 page book.
I love Words of Radiance. Still, I think if I made a top 10 fantasy books list, I think it would make my top 10.
Oh yeah.
And so here's my defense of Shalon. So I liked her on my first read through, and then found out that everyone hated her. And so I've been doing this reread as I do the Lost and Roshar podcast. I'm like, okay, like, oh boy, I'm going to see it all this time. But I read her character, I feel like different than other people, where I feel like we're supposed to know that she's not funny, that it's actually supposed to be kind of obvious. And like,
Yeah.
kind of like the small fish in a big pond, like the
Yep.
reversal of that. Right. So for me, I don't know. I don't mind her. And I will say this. I also think that the open mysteries around Shalon are really interesting.
They
So a
are.
lot of the stuff that we don't know yet is actually based around Shalon and her past and her family.
Yeah.
So even on a reread, I'm like more attracted to that because I'm still trying to find those answers. Whereas with Kaladin, a lot of the foreshadowing has paid off. Not all of it, but a
Yeah.
lot of the foreshadowing has actually paid off for Kaladin. And it is really cool to see on a reread. But you know, they're carrying bridges. They're the side carry. It's like, whoa, dude.
Revolutionary. What are we doing?
And the strap is my least favorite storyline in any Sanderson book ever. The strap
That's
is
fair.
terrible. I
That's
hated
fair.
it. I hated it.
Yeah.
But when I saw that you didn't like Way of Kings all that much, like you had problems with it, I was like, oh, is she going to like Words of Radiance? And you're one of the many people who I've seen, you know, that get through Way of Kings like, okay, I got through it. And then Words of Radiance really does seem to kind of like take off. So,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
for those out there who are listening who bounced off Way of Kings, especially the beginning of
Come
it, you know,
back. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. My husband kept trying to hang out with me the weekend that I read that book, and I was like, I can't talk to you right now. I have to read this book. Like, I was so invested. And then when I finished, I looked at him and he was like, and I was like, it was so worth getting through the first book. I almost rewrote my history with the first book after reading Words of Radiance because I loved it so much that I was like, I would go back and reread Way of Kings, which after reading it the first time, I was like, never reading that again. That's on the shelf forever. But yeah, it was Words of Radiance is one of the best fantasy reads that I've ever had. I absolutely just cannot say enough good things about that book. I love it so much.
Kai said he made it to page 333. Maybe I'll retry it next year. I'll just give you a recap and you can just start Words of Radiance, dude. Just don't even worry about it.
Honestly, like just get into Words of Radiance, guys. It's so good.
How do you feel about Oathbringer thus far? Non-spoiler thoughts. I mean, are you continuing the hype train of Words of Radiance, or
No,
are you okay?
I'm not, but I'm still enjoying it. So as of my rankings so far, Way of Kings is still my bottom of my ranking, but my expectations were different going into this book because of the fact that I knew a lot of people were like, hey, heads up, Oathbringer is a bit of a slog at times. And I was like, that's fine. And now that I know more in depth about the characters and things are happening, I feel like I'm okay taking more time to get to things. Whereas in Way of Kings, I was like, nothing is happening. And we've been having nothing happening for 700 pages. Like,
that sounds like my kind of book.
Right? Like you said, you're like, we're carrying bridges on the side now. And I was like, what are we going to do next? Carry them backwards? Like, what else is there to do?
Whoa.
But yeah, I've been enjoying Oathbringer. And I like that we're getting to know different characters more and that we've gotten a wider swath of POVs. That for me has been really good. So that's all I can say without being very spoilery.
Yeah, I think Oathbringer, especially the end and kind of like I would say a bit of a risk that Sanderson takes with the climax is interesting. So I'll love to see your full thoughts and all spoiler thoughts as well.
Yeah.
On that. So I mean, are you going to continue it right into Rhythm of War? Are you taking a break? Like, what's this? When does the year of Sanderson end for you?
I don't know. So I technically started on Christmas Day last year, and my goal was to finish by Christmas Day this year, but I don't know. I keep trying other things and dabbling into other things. Like once I get through this GGK book, I feel like I'll probably then just head back straight into Oathbringer and I'll finish Oathbringer. But then I don't know. Like, honestly, I feel like I might wait a little bit and read it later in the year next year because we're supposed to get Stormlight 5 next year. But
Yeah,
then
that's a
I
good
also
point.
have Sunlit Man here waiting. And I'm like, but that would be nice to read too. So there's just too many tough choices.
I would say take your time
Yeah.
because especially with four strange. I
I've
think
heard
four
a
is strange.
lot of mixed things about
I
4.
wish I had waited. I binged them right in an order, and I wish I had waited. I think Jared's experience is hilarious. He said, when I read Oathbringer, I thought the series was supposed to be a trilogy like Mistborn. I was so confused that he didn't wrap everything up. And then Jared, you realize that you have 30 more years till it's completed. There's some really interesting Stormlight rankings. Like Ryan has
Yeah,
River Radiance as his least favorite. Murphy has it as her favorite. It's very interesting. Yeah, Stormlight to me is just fun.
it
And
is.
it's fun even just to hear people talk about it. I mean, of course, there can be with any fandom, there can be
Yeah,
intense conversation around it, and people get a little red in the face. But
a little, yeah. I
people.
heard your conversation with Jared about it last time, and I was sitting there nodding in agreement with a lot of the things that were being said. And I was like, but I will never say these things on my channel because people get very upset. So, yeah, but I mean, it's one of those series that it's it's interesting because of the fact that it's so expansive, and I appreciate now, having read Words of Radiance, all the detail that went into Way of Kings. So I like when
Mhm.
books can make me feel that way in a series, where I look back at them retrospectively and feel better about them. Like, I that doesn't happen a lot of the time for me. I'll get further away from a book, and I feel like most of the time my opinion of it will go down, and in that case, it's been the opposite. So
Hmm.
it's been good from that perspective for me, but I am excited to keep going with it because I think it is a good series. Yeah, Words of Radiance is just so, so good.
Yeah, revisiting Way of Kings and reading it just a couple chapters a week, it's crazy to think that it was written 10, 11, 12 years ago,
Yeah,
and there are literally things that, like, you're just pointing out, you're like, "Whoa, wait, what?"
yeah.
Uh, and then, I'm not the Cosmere, astronaut, I'm not
It's
traveling all these different
Bookborn.
places, but I've read enough to where something kind of like you're like, "Wait, is that an inkling of what we read in this book that was
Yes.
released in this year?" And you're just like, "Well," I mean, whether or not that is for me, that
Mhm.
is still really cool. Like,
Yeah.
I respect the hustle of that, and overall just the ambition of it all. So,
I have loved that part of it, and I know that people can get really particular about the order in which
mhm.
they read the Cosmere. I loved the order that I read it, and because of the fact that I've been picking up on a lot of things as I'm reading, and I'll send a message to Bookborn or Kyle, and I'm like, I think this is who this is. I think this is what this is. And it's been a really fun experience for that. But also, Sanderson has ruined me as a reader because now I feel like I'm constantly looking for things when I read other books. I'm like, there must be like 12 secrets hidden in this
Okay.
story that I should find. And that's often not the case.
All right. It's only an hour into the episode, but I finally have a recommendation for you. So I'm gonna mess up your TBR, which you are obligated to read, by the way. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
David Mitchell. So David Mitchell, I mentioned I read the Bone Clocks. I'm reading Slade House.
Yes.
He has nowhere. It's not Cosmere stuff, but it's like the David Mitchell verse, kind of, where like
Yeah.
certain names of people will pop up in books. So it's
Uh,
not like super tightly wound. But for instance, the Bone Clocks, reading it before Slade House, there would be stuff in Slate House. You'd be like, this is weird. And it's and it'd be fine. Like, you don't
yeah.
have to read Bone Clocks first, technically. But because I read the Bone Clocks, Slade House is like, wait, what? I know exactly what's actually happening right
Oh,
now, and
that's
the
cool.
POVs don't. And David Mitchell is also, you're mentioning kind of like that. You don't mind, you like some satirical stuff, maybe, or just
Yes.
funny. I'm telling you, David Mitchell is balancing that line of like writing something that is, in my opinion, very smart, but also just downright funny and
Yeah.
very still human in his perspectives. And the way he writes his characters is so impressive because at least these two books that I'm reading, they're separated into parts, and each part is a different POV, and they have totally different voices
Oh, I
to
love
each
that.
other. And Bone Clocks is a 600-page book. It is one of the most readable books I've ever read, and it is not like complex with its language, but it is
Yeah.
beautiful writing. I mean, just gorgeous writing. I highly, highly recommend to you,
Okay.
David Mitchell.
I will check that out. Honestly, like, that sounds right up my alley. I feel like something like a Cosmere read is wonderful, and
Mhm.
Words of Radiance, I think, is an excellent book. I think the most difficult writing to do well is is humor.
Oh
And
yeah.
when you can do that and maintain having your character not look like a caricature and having them remain looking like a human, that is the most impressive style of writing to me. So that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, and also I just think there's a lot of cheekiness to David Mitchell's writing, and as Daniel says here, did you catch it? How in the Bone Clocks, the author's novel, there's an author in the book, and he says the author's novel is criticized for being info dumpy in the fantasy part, and then the fantasy part in Bone Clocks is super info dumpy. Like there's a little like, he's kind of winking at you a little bit, but
I
it's
like
not
that.
like distracting. It's just like a little table dressing on the novel.
Okay.
It is set in our world.
Okay.
Uh, and then the fantasy stuff comes in. So you could classify it as urban fantasy or as,
Sure.
pretentious people say magical realism. Uh, it is that very much, but it's so good. Jared says a lot of fantasy fans would love Mitchell. He's a gateway into more lit fic stuff
Yeah.
for fantasy fans. I think he has the most nominations for a Booker ever to not win.
Wow.
He's always like right there, but he is just fantastic. I highly recommend checking it out. Cloud Atlas is high up on my list now as well. So the Bone
I
Clocks was so good.
Yeah, I've heard of Cloud Atlas, and then I had heard of the Bone Clocks when you were reading it. Oh, Joanna, if you can go at my pace, then absolutely.
John Smith says David Mitchell was good in Peep Show. Yes, the other David Mitchell, who has also
Exactly.
written a book, I think. So it's very confusing.
It is. But I mean, it's kind of like John Williams. When I came across John Williams, I was
Yeah.
like the composer. I
There's
had
so
to
many
do
people named John Williams that have done cool stuff in the
I
past.
know. It was just so confusing. I had to really it took me a little while. I was like, I had no idea he wrote any books. And then I was like, no, he absolutely did not write books. Why did you think that? So yeah, it's just assuming.
I also do to pride myself on making at least somewhat good recommendations. For instance, I told Joanna without a shadow of a doubt that Albo. Why am I forgetting the name of the book?
A
Help me out.
song for our bond.
Oh my god! I was thinking "Seas of Albadone" by my friends. That was just a nice little plug there. But "Song for Our Bond," I was like, Joanna, like literally, I would bet my life on it that this is going to be like a new favorite book, and I was
Yeah.
spot on with that. I knew Stoner would work for Alan, and it did.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly that you could like David Mitchell.
Okay.
So
Yeah. I like a lot of stories that take place in our world. Like I loved Lions, which I know isn't our world, but kind of like is our world because it's
yeah,
historical fantasy. And I love Neil Gaiman. Like Neil Gaiman is one of my all-time favorite
that's
authors.
why I
And
feel strongly that you could enjoy it because
yeah.
I know you're a big Neil Gaiman fan, and then that's someone I haven't read a lot of. I read Ocean at the End of the Lane, but I still have not read American Gods or any of his other stuff.
Oh, I love him. He holds a very dear place for me. I've seen him speak live,
Hmm.
and so you and I mentioned this off screen with you, but I've had several concussions as you have as well. My first concussion was a week before I was supposed to go see Neil Gaiman speak. And my husband was like, "Are you feeling up for going?" I was like, "I am 100% going. Like I can be falling asleep there to the beautiful subtle tones of Neil Gaiman's voice and that's going to happen." And was so medicated from the stuff that they had me on and was just like in my own drugged bubble listening to him speak and it felt like he was talking directly to me and it was like the most magical moment of my life. He is just a gem of a human. I love him so much. I love everything he writes for the most part. There's been a few that have been a little less that I love, but I have never not enjoyed a Neil Gaiman read. And he's one of the few authors that has successfully published in so many different age groups, which to me is so neat.
Hmm.
Like I have a book of his for my 16-month-old. He's done children's books. He's done YA, new age, adult. I'm like, what an impressive human.
A lot of really notable writers are not afraid to dip their toes in writing for kids or young
Mhm.
adults. You think about Le Guin and what Ursi was and how it grew with the reader. By book 4, it is a different series and it is really powerful in my opinion. But also you think about people even like Stephen King,
Oh
who wrote
yeah.
Eyes of the Dragon, which I happen to actually really enjoy. It's a very middle of the road book, but like I don't know, I just loved it so much. So I think there's plenty of authors that you know take it serious to go into these different age groups, and Gaiman is one of them. Mohammed says, "Why do you like soft magic systems to hard ones?" Thank you for the question. I appreciate. I assume it's directed to both of us.
I assume so, yes. Do you want to answer first?
Um, Yeah, sure. I'll answer first because I don't know. Is that true for you? Do you like soft magic systems over hard ones always?
No, not always. Like Warbreaker, I loved so much for the magic system. It was weird after I finished reading it, and I was like, that was so brilliant. Why had no one ever thought about doing that before? When it's like such a unique and like niche thing that he wrote about, but I thought it was magical and wonderful. But the soft magic system, I feel like so much of our life is mundane, right? Like as humans, we're pretty routine based. Most people, it's formulaic. You wake up at a relatively certain time, you go to work, you go to school, you come home. That's your day. Having the idea that you can have magic somehow appear in your world and kind of like upheaval your life, be it in a really positive way or maybe a less positive way, is so interesting because you're reading it from a perspective of it happening to someone like you. And I feel like for me, that's something that I find so fascinating.
Hmm.
I'm like, how would I react in that kind of situation? And I guess that kind of happens. That's kind of what we were saying earlier in terms of characters that we relate to versus ones that we don't relate to. And I feel like in low magic books or soft magic system books, I feel like in those cases, I'm looking more towards relatable characters and maybe not relatable ones
Hmm.
because it would be so interesting if something like that did happen.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting, like just kind of going off that, is like thinking about like so maybe someone we don't actually mesh with, like
Mhm.
thinking about power ending up in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tale as old as time, and to me, it's always interesting no matter what. So that's just something I'm thinking about as you're talking. I
Mhm.
prefer soft magic systems to hard ones because I would rather page time be spent on other things, mostly. And I also like a bit of mystery to it. I like
Mhm.
whenever things are a little bit more open ended in stories. I'm very big on things being ambiguous. And sometimes whenever things are fully explained or everything is tied up, it just like I feel like the story is finished. And
Yeah.
not
And
just
you
in
don't
the
like endings, we've
yeah, just
established,
in just
right?
the obvious way, right? There are so many things in some of my favorite series that will never be explained, and I'm okay with that. So I think it adds a sense of
Yeah.
wonder to the world, as well as I prefer like less magic usually to more, and hard ones tend to
Be
have a
more.
lot more to happen. You know what's interesting is that there's a lot of magic systemy things in the long price quartet, and I feel like people don't talk about it a ton. I would never call it a hard magic system because I don't really like these labels anyways, but
Yeah.
that's one. And it's similar to Sanderson. The magic system is not just the magic system to create a video game out of it, but it also ties into a lot of the stuff in the world and
Yeah.
why the world is the way it is, and
Oh, yeah, definitely.
ties into the characters' lives and possibly resources and stuff. So it's not that I think hard ones are less. It's just that I don't know if I've seen a ton of hard magic systems outside of Sanderson.
I
Uh,
have to agree, honestly. And it's so interesting when you say like you're fine with certain things being ambiguous. And I feel like that some of the time, but then other times I'm like, oh my gosh, I so want the answer to this. And I mean, this is what I was implying with Martin in the sense that everything that man writes is important. And like so many of the mysteries that are woven in there, I'm like, there's so many good ones. And some I'm fine with having no explanations for. And others I'm like, oh, I would love to know if that's gonna be a thing. Um, how do you feel about that? Like, is there any one in particular from Martin that you're like, "Oh, I definitely want an answer to that," or do you feel
the
kind of
Doom of
okay?
Valyria.
Yeah, right? Wouldn't the Doom be, like, the best?
The Doom of Valyria is my favorite piece of like fantasy world building.
Me too! Oh my gosh, I love the Doom so much.
It was the Faceless Men. There's no way it wasn't. There's
Oh,
literally no way it wasn't.
it's so good. Yes, this is I okay. I'm getting ahead of myself now because I'm very excited. But when House of the Dragon came out, my husband and I were talking about this at length. I enjoyed House of the Dragon, fine. But like when we were sitting back hearing they're gonna be doing adaptations based on Game of Thrones material, I was like, like I was so committed to the idea that they were gonna do the Doom. I was
Well,
like, that would be amazing.
it's not greenlit, but
I
they are there.
know, but I
There's a discussion about the Doom of Valyria show.
Wouldn't it be amazing though? Like you could have
The budget would have to be crazy.
oh, it would have to be astronomical, but like it would be so you could do one of two things, right? You could do either the development of Valyria and you could have the conquering of the Rhoynar and you could then have the blood magic and the dragon establishment and then you could end with the Doom, or like
Start with the Doom.
You can start with the Doom and you can have Aegon's father heading to Dragonstone, and like the opening scene could be, I believe her name, was it also a Daenerys that had the vision of the Doom coming?
Daenerys the Dreamer.
Yes, Daenerys the Dreamer.
Daenerys
So yeah, you could have it like the opening scene is her having the vision of the Doom of Valyria and like them fleeing and whatever. I'm like, there's so many options.
It could be one season. It could be a limited run season, 10 episodes, and it just goes into that. I mean, the budget would have to be insane because Valyria is the coolest setting ever.
It's so cool. I mean, and if you wanted
you're making
to like
my day. I was having a bad day, but you're making my day. I'm not gonna lie.
I know, it's so good. If you even wanted to like expand upon it from there, you could then do what they kind of did in House of the Dragon and age up the characters, and then you could lead it into Aegon's conquest. Like there's so many options. And I know that they really wanted to do House of the Dragon because they were like, everyone loves dragons and we'll have all the dragons on screen at one time. And it's a good story. Like the Dance of Dragons is a good story. But to me, the Doom is so interesting because there's so little known about it that it would be just, so good.
Yeah, now with that, Doom of Valyria is just as good not being explained.
Yeah, it is.
That's the beauty of it. And you know, being a part of like the very in-depth fandom of A Song of Ice and Fire with the podcast I'm on, I am constantly preaching on there. Guys, you have to start to pick and choose as we get to the point where the series may come to a close, whether Martin finishes or someone else, that like what needs to be answered for this to be satisfying, and we need to adjust those expectations to be realistic. Like there are people who are like, I need on page confirmation that you know, for instance, Arthur Dayne is corn half hand. It's like, no, you don't need that. You actually don't. It doesn't affect the story in the least.
I love Arthur Dayne as a side note.
I love Arthur Dayne. Oh my god,
so good.
I could go on about Barristan Selmy and Arthur Dayne and Kristen Cole for like 3.5 hours.
Oh, so well, that'll have to be our next chat, Jimmy, because I can too.
We can do it a Song of Ice and Fire chat anytime you want. I'm more than happy to do it. Sam, thank you for the 5 spot. Appreciate it very much. Says, can't stay, Jimmy, but wanted to say I appreciate that you've helped encourage me read more. Glad you're doing better, and yes, I'm still praying for you. Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Very nice.
Yes. I am physically doing better, which is great. I was back at jiu-jitsu this week, strangling foals. Let me tell you what, when you haven't strangled someone in about a month and a half, I know most of you don't strangle people on a normal basis.
And maybe we're all missing out.
You're missing out. Legally being able to choke someone out is like one of the cooler things, in my opinion.
It's anger management that's allowable. Right?
Tell you what, after today, I feel like I should go to jiu-jitsu maybe in the morning because I just had a heck of a day. I was kind of telling you prior, I uploaded One Piece video to my manga channel, and let me tell you what, the thing about fandoms is not just One Piece fandom, but if you go against the grain, people get a bit upset. Same thing with the Song of Ice and Fire, and actually, I've been very conscious of this in the booktube sphere because, for instance, Joanna had a Song of Ice and Fire read along, and she was inviting people on. Some people were reading for the first time, some people were reading for the third time, whatever.
Yeah.
And she invited me, of course, and I just decided that I would be better off to kind of stay away because you got to have room for like discussion, and you have to have room for fresh opinions and not just immediately tackle them with, well, you didn't realize that in Feast for Crows, Tom Seven Strings was actually in River. You know what I mean? It's like, relax, just relax and let people. And then if they want to know more, they can. And if they don't, that's also completely okay.
Yeah.
So I think about this a lot because I do interact with so many different fandoms, and
yeah,
what I experienced today was not. I don't think it's necessarily a One Piece problem. I think it's a fandom problem. And A Song of Ice and Fire definitely goes through that as well. So it's tough. It's tough because on BookTube, I feel like, we're experiencing a lot of different series, and there's a lot of fans of a lot of different series. It's not always that common to drill in.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a difference of opinion from someone who's read something 7 times and someone that read it once, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying that they're talking about the thing in a different manner,
Oh,
and you have to
100%.
keep that in mind, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, right? This is kind of what we were saying, like with going back and reading Way of Kings. It's a completely different conversation for someone reading Way of Kings for the first time versus going back on it on a reread when you've already read further into the Stormlight Archive. It's a completely different experience, and both are interesting and valid. I mean, Murphy has a good question here to me.
So do
uh,
you strangle people often? About 4 times a week whenever I'm healthy. It's wonderful.
you're setting the bar pretty high for us, those non-strangling people. But yeah, I can get why if you're having like new people kind of come to that conversation, it's a different type of conversation you're having if you want to get like really into it versus if you're keeping it more just that book and that
Mhm.
experience, which is fine. It's just different.
Yeah, definitely. I've always tried to be very conscious of like the fandoms that I'm a part of that I'm really passionate about, which, A Song of Ice and Fire and Malazan, I would consider that, to let people kind of come to their own conclusions. And I
Yeah.
think that there's a problem like whenever you crowd people with information or, what is the appropriate take on something, not only does it neuter conversation, but it also then builds this like echo of people
Mm,
being like, well, I heard this and I heard this. And then all of a sudden you've watched 6 A Song of Ice and Fire streams and everyone's saying the same thing.
yeah.
And like I'm dying for a new take. I've been reading this damn series for 12 years and
Yeah.
George is not too concerned with getting me the next one. So,
No,
I gotta hear something fresh.
I
So
agree. It's fun. And that's what's nice about coming to things at different times and having different readers come to them at different times. Yeah, it's just good. It makes for interesting conversation.
yeah, and different backgrounds. One of my friends was a historical fiction writer, and her name's Adrienne Dillard, and she writes a lot about the Tudors era. And she was talking
Mm,
about Anne Boleyn, and
yep.
she had this amazing take on Marjorie Tyrell and about how she actually kind of represents Anne Boleyn in
Oh yeah.
Westeros. And there's like a bunch of lines about how Marjorie's neck is very fine, which Anne Boleyn famously was,
Beheaded. Yeah.
beheaded, and she had a beautiful neck.
Yep.
And it's like that is so cool. But
She also the actress Natalie Dormer played Anne Boleyn on The Tudors, so that's just a little fun fact for everybody.
I didn't even
But
so I actually started watching that show because I had Game of Thrones actors in it. Like
yeah,
when I was waiting for like a next season of Game of Thrones or something, I was like,
yeah,
okay, I gotta watch this. And I actually really liked the show, but I didn't realize I was even looking at Anne Boleyn. I had no
yeah,
idea.
yeah. I actually enjoyed it too. I came to it once it had already finished airing, and just so I'm Canadian by birth. I moved to the US in 2017, and couldn't work for like 9 months while I was waiting for my green card and stuff. So I had 9 months of stuff to do, and I had just finished grad school that spring. So I was like, I'm gonna just catch up on like everything I've missed from the last 3 years that I've been in this bubble, and I ended up binging it then, and I really enjoyed it. But I did find it funny, basically how they made Natalie Dormer the same in both shows. Like
I
she's
typecasted her.
basically the same. Yeah, 100%. But she's excellent in
She
both
is
roles. So, I mean, it was for a purpose.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I'm a huge fan of her. Um, so in your 9 months of not having anything to do, did you find that to be at your advantage, or how did
No.
you feel during that time? I'm very
Yes
curious.
and no. So at, it was a really odd time for me in life. And I still don't know if I fully processed it all that much. And I was just talking to my husband about this a few weeks ago because of the fact that within 3 months, I left academia. I got married and I moved to a new country. And it was a complete identity shift for me. I had no friends in the area that we moved to. I moved to Virginia at the time, and my husband had only been living there for about a year
Mhm.
because he had been relocated there for work, and we just didn't know anyone. I didn't drive at that point because I came from a city and I didn't need to drive because I had great public transit everywhere I needed to be. And I was so just isolated for 9 months that I was pretty depressed for the first 9 months, honestly, because I was like, can't work. I can't go meet people because I like you need a car in this city. I was in Richmond, Virginia. The public transit is terrible,
Mhm.
or just non-existent. It's just not there. And we had ended up buying a house in the suburbs, which like I don't know why we did that because we hate the suburbs. Like it was one of those things that like none of it made sense. So what I ended up doing during that time was I completely stopped reading for one thing because I was so burnt out from reading from school. And I watched a lot of TV and I taught myself how to professionally bake. And I created a blog. I have a baking website. Like that's now my full-time job. Like I'm a recipe developer and a food
I've
photographer.
seen some
And
of these pictures. They're
yeah,
very impressive.
thank you. So I created that in that 9 months. So it ended up being productive in that sense. But in terms of like my personal growth and development, it was lacking. And Jared's 100% correct in that. I had only ever viewed myself as an academic. My plan initially was to go on and do my PhD. I did everything I was supposed to do. I left grad school with 4.0. I went to a very, very good school. And that was the plan. But the field that I was looking to apply to keeps getting cut because it's a humanities field and the funding is just less and less. And the funding that they allocate to it now, they go on a weird rotational basis that like I wanted to study ancient art and history, specifically about Augustus. And they decided that they were going on a 5-year break from ancient art academics. And they were like, if you want to do Renaissance art, like we'd be really happy to have you. I was like, I know nothing about Renaissance art. So that would be fruitless. And at that point, I was like, I can put my life on hold for 5 years and maybe do like another master's degree or two in the meantime and apply, or I can try to do something else, I guess. So yeah, it was just a very weird experience. I played a lot of World of Warcraft.
Order Alliance.
I played Alliance, but I've played both. I know that you're a Horde player. I actually met my husband through World of Warcraft, so it's very special to us. So yeah,
he was a tank, wasn't he?
No, he wasn't actually.
Oh, okay. Oh, did you get a DPS, Chad?
Yeah, no.
Oh, let's go.
He was a priest, so he's kind of basic, but it's fine.
Just cooking him, my God.
Yeah,
or baking him in your case.
Yeah, but yeah, baking was the right choice, right?
Was that the most significant 9-month period of your life ever? Like, if you had to break your life up into nine months?
No, honestly. Since moving to America, I've had a very odd string of events happen to me. So the first concussion I had, that kind of then set off like a weird string of events, and that I ended up having a concussion about a year later. And I knew that I had a concussion. I went to a doctor and I was like, I hit my head. I'm pretty sure it was a concussion. And she looked at me and she's like, oh no, you're fine. And I was like, I'm not fine. Like something's actively wrong. And she was like, no, you're fine. And she's like, can you do this with your hand? And I was like, yeah. I'm pretty sure like a toddler could do that if you ask them to. And she's like, oh, well, you don't have a concussion. You're fine. That then set off a slurry of health issues for me. I ended up becoming a teacher at that point. I was teaching in high school and middle school, which I realized very quickly on I'm not suited to. Teaching at a collegiate level and then going down to high school and middle school is not the same breed of person. I have the most admiration for people that teach middle school and high school and elementary school, really any teacher at this point. Like you guys are the MVPs of life. But
besides Alan.
Yeah. But I ended up developing a vestibular disorder. My eyes stopped working because of how bad the concussion was. I couldn't read. I had no idea what was going on. I ended up seeing 30 doctors in about 9 months until I finally went back to Montreal. And I saw my family doctor and he looked at me and he's like, you have post-concussion syndrome. Like you need to go get an MRI immediately. So I flew back to Virginia. I ended up getting hooked up with a concussion specialist down there, got an MRI, and ended up going for ocular therapy, vestibular therapy, speech therapy, PT, like everything. I had to leave my job because I couldn't work. And that really was an odd time. So that ended up lasting about 2 years. But the first 9 months of that, if we're looking at like straight 9-month periods, that's the one. It was not something that I would wish upon anybody. Yeah, it's brain injuries change you in a very profound way a lot of the time, and people don't know because it's an invisible illness, so it's hard.
Yeah, I went through. First off, I'm sorry that you went through that. I mean, that is crazy. It took that many people to kind of pinpoint what was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, the hand thing that blows my mind. It makes me feel like you went to the NFL legal team to be like, you know what I mean? Like, do I have a concussion? Like, no, get out there, Tua.
He looks fine. He can go play. Back
Don't be
out
a
on the
wimp.
field. Ah, exactly.
Are you aware of a gentleman named Christopher Nowinski?
That name is familiar.
Okay, so Christopher Nowinski played football at Harvard, I believe, and then went into the WWE
Yes.
and ended up having a concussion
Yeah.
and had kind of the exact same experience that you had. And this was very similar to symptoms of other people like Dynamite Kid and Bret Hart and stuff. But he is one of the forefront people actually talking about CTE and CTE research. He was a part of that NFL thing, and he's really brought a lot of attention to this thing. And that was one of the things I started paying attention to when I was in wrestling. Like, how many times have I had my bell rung?
Yeah.
You think, oh, I got knocked out, 5 times, in the
Yeah.
last 2 or 3 years, but then you start to realize that the little hits are,
They add up.
yeah, getting the bell rung, the white flash, the noise, the fuzziness. And then you start to think, you're like, maybe I've had 20, maybe I've had 30. And it got to the point wherever I was starting to feel uncomfortable in conversation because I felt like I was repeating myself.
Yeah.
Especially like, kind of towards the end before I got out of the business. There'd be times where I'd be riding with Kelsey in the car and she would say something and I'd be like, yeah, we'd have a conversation about it. And then I would like ask her about that same thing like 2 minutes later. And she's like, you just asked me that. And I'm like,
Yep.
I did.
Yeah.
And it was very scary. And, I felt like I was very rash during those times as well. Emotional. And I didn't understand why.
Oh,
And
yes.
just a really tough thing. So the brain, brain injuries are absolutely nothing to play around with. Are
No.
you better now?
It comes and it goes. I have major PTSD. Like if anyone comes near my head or anything comes near my head, I have really bad PTSD and the fear that like it's happening again because I have had concussions since then, and each time it's longer to recover. It's never going to be as bad as it was that time because now I know what I'm looking for and I know I can live through it. But it's interesting you say that because that was kind of what tipped off my husband. He's like, you keep asking me things that we've just had that conversation. And I'm like, and that would make me so frustrated because I was like, we definitely didn't just have this conversation. And then you get so mad because you're like, you're just not listening
You
or
feel
you're not hearing
embarrassed. I
things.
felt embarrassed.
Yeah. And then it became that. And my big thing too is I kept saying the wrong thing without realizing it because in my head it sounded coherent. So like it would be very basic stuff too, where I would be like, we need eggs. And then I would say, we need a sofa. Like, and he's like, what? And I'm like, we need a sofa, like on our next grocery order. And he's like, you don't get one of those at the grocery store. Like, what are you talking about? So it just became really uncomfortable. And as I was a teacher, I felt very uncomfortable because I was like, what on earth am I telling these kids? And their thinking is correct. So Lord only knows what they learned that year. But, but when we went to the concussion specialist, they actually ask you to bring your spouse with you or whomever your closest kin is basically, or who knows you best. And they asked him, they were like, has she changed in the last 9 months? And he was like, yeah. And it was hard because I had to listen to that and like listen to all the things that I had basically feared about myself and hear them verbalized from the person that knows me best. And I was like, well, shit, there it is. So yeah, it was a weird weird experience.
Yeah, being talked about in any regard is weird. Like sometimes I will see like that people will be talking about something I've said in a video,
Yeah.
like it, and they don't know I'm there, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. So it's even more weird whenever it's
Mhm.
about your health and like
Yeah.
actions you don't remember doing and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I would assume during this time reading was extraordinarily difficult for you.
I couldn't read for 2 years. So that was finally why last year I finally was at a point that I was like, my eyes are good, like I can do this again now. And then I got pregnant, which, like, if people don't know, pregnancy also changes your eyesight, which I didn't realize.
What?
I had my daughter and I was like, I'm like blind now, what's happening? And went to my eye doctor and he's like, yeah, it's hormones, it's normal. I was like, they really should tell you that as like a warning sign for when you get pregnant, like vision might change. But got my new glasses, was good to go, and was like, I'm gonna get back into this reading thing. And I started my channel as like a driving force to commit myself to keep reading.
Wow.
So that for me was, you need to read now so you have things to talk about. And this year alone, I've had like 3 concussions again, which has sucked. And I'm hoping that they're done now, because like you can't read when you're recovering from one, at least I can't. But it's been a really interesting experience to get back to reading and to fall in love with reading again, because I really missed it and I didn't realize how much I had missed it.
Mhm. Did at first was it difficult, like to
Yeah.
retain the information?
Yeah. Yes. And I find now too at times, like, I've always been prone to migraines, but I still like, I get tired more easily since having concussions. Like, it's weird. And when I'm fatigued, I have a very hard time keeping up for information.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are very scary, but happy to shed light on them, because honestly, if people don't talk about them, then no one knows. So I'm very open with that kind of stuff. Sometimes much to the chagrin of people around me that are like, we know, we don't want to talk about it. I'm like,
I'll tell you what's crazy, and if anyone from my gym is listening, I'm not I'm not trying to be mean, but it is crazy watching people put their bodies on the line and not actually even wanting to achieve anything in sense
yeah,
like so my gym that we do a lot of MMA sparring.
yep,
And I have cut back tremendously on that because like, there's a huge risk that comes with that.
yes,
And for instance, like I don't strike all that often anymore. I never really spar with striking
hmm,
either. I like to keep sharp on the techniques and stuff, but anything else is just it's too much. But like I'm constantly around brain damage. Essentially, I'm watching.
yeah,
I especially Mondays. I will either attend or watch the MMA class, and it's just like I watch some of these guys,
yeah.
and I'm just like, man, he has no idea where he is, and they're smart, young 22-year-olds, and I'm just like, man, if I could, But I'm thinking of myself as well, wrestling in a bingo hall for $15, eating chair shots with my hands not up,
Right.
and driving home, and then
Yeah,
forgetting that I drove home, and I'm just like, man, it's just it's wild. I don't know.
it is.
It's all around us. It's actually like part of our
Mhm.
daily. I watch football every Sunday, and I'm just like, well,
I
he's
do
not gonna have
too.
a good. Yeah, he's not gonna have a good time later in life.
Yeah, no, I'm an avid football fan. I have been my whole life, honestly. Like, I grew up on the NFL. I love the NFL. And since having these concussions, it's been odd for me to watch it. And it's like sometimes I'll say to my husband, I'm like, I need to leave the room. Just because I'm like, I know what that looks like later. And also, like, my husband does jujitsu, he does MMA and all that kind of stuff. And I get concerned. I'm like, you've seen what the effects look like on me. Like, we can't both be like this. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, honestly. And like, you don't think about how involved your head is with stuff until you've experienced it. And you're just like, oh yeah, like we really do rely on this thing a lot more than we realize.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, I mean, um, obviously this isn't the case for everyone, but a lot of times the body goes before the mind. And whenever you get to that stage, like, I'm not under any illusion that, I'm hoping to get my black belt before I'm 40, but like going into 40s and the 50s with the miles that I put on in my 20s. Like, I'm not going to be able to do the things I love to do physically forever.
Yeah.
And having and sharpening those mental tools and doing things, actually, like Jared says, even like chess, crosswords, books would be my thing, right?
Yeah.
And entertaining or public speaking, you know, those are just as important a lot of the time. And I try to tell that to guys at the gym, because sometimes I don't know if they see that. So we talked about expertise. We talked about things bothering you in books. Does it bother you when people get like absolutely cold cock knocked out and they're out for a day in a book and then they're just fine?
I can't even oh my God. Okay. So anytime it's in a show, like I have concussion counts going for certain things with my husband. I'm like, that's number 27 concussion in this episode alone.
If darkness swallows you at the end of a chapter and you wake up and it's another day, and then your character's just like, oh, where am I?
They're fine. And they're like, oh, my head hurts a little bit. There was a moment in Sanderson, I think it was in Way of Kings, where Kaladin's like, well, that was a concussion. I'm like, you don't just walk off a concussion. Like, that's not how that works. So yes, I do take issue with it.
Name of the Wind. Yes. I mean, honestly, there's a long list of fantasy books. And I think I've seen Guy Gavriel Kay do this once or twice as well.
He has. Also in First Law, Abercrombie mentioned it, I think, with Logan.
It's such an interesting thing to happen. I mean, it's a terrible thing to happen to someone in real life, but for a character to go through that and then to change, I mean, it could be something. Like, it could be a part of a character. And I just feel like it's one of those things where people aren't getting the most out of the events that they're putting in. It's just, you know, to get to the next scene or whatever
100%.
it might be, you know.
Yeah. Yes. I completely agree. Yeah. I would like if there was a bit more nuance there with that kind of stuff, but I guess that's just, if I ever write a fight scene and someone gets concussed, I'll put it in. And then we'll talk all about their speech therapy and their ocular therapy, and everyone will put down the book because it'll be so boring. But it's fine.
Kai says, would love to see that in your epic fantasy novel, Jimmy. Well, it ain't ever happening, so you'll never see it. Maybe I'll write one for the Discord. Maybe I'll put one in my Discord. That's what I'll do.
Have you ever written anything?
Yeah, I wrote a short story. It was pretty shitty. It was rather bad. And then I've written other things, like just random like paragraphs and stuff. I think I have a opening paragraph. Did I already read this? Folks in the chat, you guys can tell me. Did I already read the paragraph that I worked on for like an opening of a story? Because I'll read it if not. I actually did some editing on it that I think it's a little bit better than it was. But if I've already read it on Chatting with Nuts, I won't do it again. So people in the chat, remind me. I think I've already done this. But yeah, I actually am constantly thinking about writing. The problem is just the biggest commitment, you know, that I can make. I would take it very seriously, and I have a hard time like dialing thing. I'm just obsessive. What about you?
I'm a hard committer.
Okay, people are saying I didn't. Okay, I'll read this. I think this is the edited version, but keep in mind, folks, I'm dumb. So Gus pushed the tavern door open and welcomed the smoke stinging his eyes. Stale tobacco with a lingering scent of piss filled the air. The conversation at round tables offset music that boomed from a shoddy stage in the back of the crowded room. He squinted and located his usual seat at the bar. It was not empty. Gus swam through the sea of townsfolk and lightly tapped the shoulder of the trespasser. After a brief glance, the man recoiled, his eyes wide. The patron scurried away, drink splashing over the side of his tankard. Gus lifted himself on top of the stool, and he let out a sigh as if returning home from a long journey. He trailed his palm over worn wood etched with gouges and crevices that could only be explained by years of hostile or playful knives, swords, and other sharp instruments. Etchings that interrupted a once finely finished bar top that itself came from a meeting with an axe that proclaimed its purpose was better suited for a man's will rather than its natural belonging. Purpose is born from scars, or so it is for those seeking meaning. This is not the edited version. I have a much better version, but I don't know where it is, so I'm not going to look for it.
I still think that sounds like a pretty interesting opening, Jimmy. I think you should carry on with that.
Nah.
Well, that was fun.
Oh, we entered an inn and it smells bad. Huh? Like, it's such a bad opening. It's so bad.
Who cares? I don't think it's a bad opening.
I think it could be a lot better. But.
I mean, it's a start. That's what
See,
writing is.
Jared, see, killer final line though. Thank you. I do think the final line is good. There is definitely a better version of that. I just don't know where it is. I reworked it like 5 times, but I don't know where it is.
I do agree with Desolate Lang here. I think the description is good. It gives a very clear image as to what is going on. I like the idea of the bar stool not being empty. That to me, I'm like, ooh, intrigue. Who is that person? So yeah, I like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the problem I had with it in the edits that I did, by the way, thank you, is I made it a lot more active. There's a lot of language in there that I felt was a little bit too passive, and then also there's a progressive present in there that I'm not a huge fan of. So there was a lot of stuff that I reworked in that. So I kind of read the worst version of it possibly, but either way,
I would still be interested in seeing what you come up with, but if you don't want to, that's fine. No
Well,
pressure.
the idea is a short story. It's about an executioner who is basically facing his job being automated out of existence because the alchemist has developed a serum that is much more humane in a way of executing
Oh,
people. But he still has to end, his basically he has like a list, and these are the last people that they're going to do before they switch to this new method. And there's like a terseness
interesting.
there, and he has to finish this job because it guarantees him lands once he retires from the service of the king. And he's worrying about going into another profession, yada yada yada. So
I
that
think that sounds compelling, honestly. I like that kind of short story, so I would read it.
I write a story about my dad. Whenever he was a teenager, he went on a road trip uh, from like Myrtle Beach to Florida and didn't tell anybody. Like he just hitched rides, and I think he was like 14. And I don't want to
Whoa.
tell that story necessarily, but I want to tell a
Yeah,
story like that because him telling me that, I was just like, people did that. Like that is a crazy thing to
right.
do. And he did it. He was missing and for like a month or two, I guess,
Wow.
while he hitchhiked down to Florida as a teenager, and I just thought it was so interesting. So
That's wild.
yeah, I have a lot of ideas and no motivation or skills.
Gumption to do it.
Yeah. Have you ever written a short story or a poem or anything?
I haven't written a short story, but I'm actually working on a book now. So
Let's hear it.
oh God, I can't read it now, but I can give you the base idea of what it is. It is a satirical sci-fi. So that's basically what I'm working on. But it is a fun retelling of the Arthurian story in a very, very weird roundabout way.
Hmm.
Um Involves an academic that cannot find a job, ends up having to take a job as an advisor to a megalomaniac dictator who is seeking to basically annihilate many, many planets. And he decides that he will spare 3 if they can find the holy grails that he sets in mysterious places for them. So, yeah.
Interesting. I like it.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying writing it. I passed 40,000 words today on it, so it's getting there.
So are you doing
Um,
NaNoWriMo? Is
I
that what?
am actually doing nano. Yeah, I started, but I haven't. I had about 20,000, 23,000 before I started nano, so I've done 19,000 since nano started. So
Wow.
it's been going at a decent pace. No, John, I do not write in French. That would be, even though I'm from French Canada, that I'm an English speaker natively. I do speak French, but that would be absolutely exhausting in my opinion to
Are you a
write
big
in.
fan of George St. Pierre?
I am. We're both from Montreal, so I was a big GSP fan.
Nope.
I had a friend that actually did jujitsu with him at his gym, so I would get little stories from him and stuff. So that was kind of fun.
Very
But
cool.
yeah, I am. I'm happy to be writing. I think it's a really fun activity to be doing, and the few people that I've had read it have said that it's been funny, which is my hope. So that's good.
That's awesome. Gavin says 19,000 words so far in this month is incredible, and I
Thank you.
totally agree. Desolate wants to know, that sounds really fun. What's your inspiration? Is it in the style of HHG? I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh,
um,
makes
So
sense.
from the people that have read it, I have been told that it is very reminiscent of Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett, which hits all the right notes for me because that's my kind of humor. So, hey, Montrealers. Um, so yeah, it does kind of have some of that aspect to it, and some of it is absurdist, but I'm trying to keep parts of it grounded as well too. Because I liked Hitchhikers, but I actually found that it kind of dipped in the middle for me. The beginning is really, really strong, and then I didn't love the middle and the ending as much as the beginning. So I'm trying to stay as consistent as I can all the way through. But we'll see. It might be absolute garbage. Who knows? People might just be lying to me.
But here's the
We'll
thing: once you have it out and you've actually finished something, I mean, that you've done something very few people ever do. And
yeah,
that's, the short story I wrote a while back is really bad, but it is still something I did and I accomplished, and it came from my own mind. And
yeah,
I don't like it, but it's really cool. Like
yes.
I still read it from time to time and shake my head and like I don't even know where I begin to make edits at this point, but you know what I mean? It's something that came from well, maybe not totally original because everything comes from something before it, in my opinion.
Right.
But you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
It's your conversation with the ever-going stories.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Joanna was saying about journaling, right? Like you can go back and look at a journal entry and be like, "Oh, that's who I was at that time." And it's interesting when you look at pieces that you've written and you can go back and be like, "These are the ideas that were swimming in my head at that point." And I was actually able to put them, pen to paper or finger to keyboard kind of thing. But it's fun to be able to kind of dig into your subconscious and see just what comes out and allow yourself the freedom to do that. Because I feel like we tap into something in ourselves when we're writing that we just maybe don't necessarily allow ourselves to do in our general everyday life, right? Like I'm not gonna like act like an absurdist dictator in my general everyday life, but
Are you sure? Have you ever
I
tried? It
mean,
might be fun.
not the guy that I'm writing. I would not want to be like that. But it's fun to write, it's exciting. So yeah, I definitely feel like creatively it's a good way to get that energy out. But I
Yeah.
mean, people can do that in a myriad of ways, so it's fun.
Yeah, definitely. Steve Donahue said whenever he was encouraging a lot of people to start NaNoWriMo, and I thought it was really cool. But he was just like, guys, really, at the end of the day, it's just a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
whenever you hit that stride, and I will say this, even that short story I don't like, there became a time wherever I was guaranteeing myself, I was writing 1,000 pages a day about, and like it was something I looked forward to. I would get into like a flow, and it was fun. It really was. It
Yeah.
was a good time. It took a while to get there, but I started looking forward to coming up with like the next scene. And
Mhm.
maybe one day I'll get back into that groove. Jared says the fact that you don't like what you wrote is normal and actually a good sign. It shows your skills haven't caught up to your already developed taste. And that is one of the harder things.
Yeah.
As Jake says that my story wasn't bad, but I was hard on myself. I'm reading some of the best,
Yes.
and I don't want to do something if I'm not trying to be the best. That's just who I am. So I
Yeah.
do compare myself against a Robin Hobb or a David Mitchell or Ursula K. Le Guin or a Steven Erickson. I do, because
Yeah.
like, that's the kind of thing that I would want to make. Um, I find that I'm attracted to people who have a really good hand, or I'm sorry, hand on their tone, voice, style. And that is something that has escaped me thus far writing. And maybe
Mhm.
the day that clicks will be the day that I decide to take it a little bit more serious.
I think sometimes too, it just happens when you're telling the story that you're meant to be telling. Like a few years ago, this is part of my 9-month slump of time that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do all the things and I'm gonna write a book and I'm gonna come up with all these ideas. And my husband was at work one day and he came home and I had like drawn like 6 maps. I had come up with this magic system and I was like, this is the story I'm gonna tell. I had the opening scene done. And as I sat to write it, I was like, what is this? Like, what is even the point of this story? And I found that I could not find my voice in that at all. And if it's not somewhat clear, I'm a semi sarcastic person. I like sarcasm. And the book I'm writing has a heavily sarcastic tone. And I'm like, this is more what I was meant to write primary. So sometimes it's just finding the right thing for you at the right time. And also sometimes maybe acknowledging things about yourself. Like, I might not write the epic fantasy novel, but I might write a very good sarcastic story. And admitting those things to yourself and owning them.
And only you can write it the way that you write. You know what I mean? Like no matter
Exactly.
what.
Yeah.
And I think that's really awesome. Jared recommends Le Guin's book, Steering the Craft. It's full of writing exercises. I recommend. And I also recommend it.
I'll check it out.
I would encourage, for the folks who are listening to this, like, guys, this is supposed to be a podcast about reading. Well, I would say that reading books about writing has increased my ability to digest stories and to figure
Yeah.
out what I like about them and what I don't. And sometimes it actually brings books to life that I otherwise maybe wouldn't have liked as much.
Yeah.
Whenever I was reading Art of Fiction by John Gardner, I was reading Wise Man's Fear. And, Patrick Roth is one of those people, like, people are like, oh, his prose is just so gorgeous. And then there's other people, it's like, his prose is garbage. But there's undeniably certain parts of the craft that he does extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
And I think diction happens to be one of those things. But like, as I'm reading this book about writing, I'm reading this, reading the story and I'm seeing it. Can be distracting, by the
Yes.
way. It actually, I would prefer to do that with a book that I'm not super invested in the plot in, which with
Yeah.
Rothfuss, I'm not super invested in the plot as much as some other books. So it was kind of a cool exercise. But I encourage readers to read books about writing. They're also usually extremely short, which is
Yeah.
nice. You could read like a chapter a day. They're very topical. So
Yeah.
and they work great on audio as well.
Essays too. They're so like Ursula K.
Certainly.
Le Guin has really good essays on writing. Tolkien back in the day had some really interesting essays about writing. So, and just storytelling. Mythopedia is one that I highly encourage people to read if they want to get into that kind of thing. But yeah, they're all good.
Yeah, there's so many good things out there. And yes, a lot of essays that are free too, which is great.
Yes, which is so nice. And you can get so many free things on Libby too. Libby for me this year has been a big, big place where I've been spending my time. So I'm a big fan.
Hayden, I love this comment that Hayden left. Says, best part of being creative is that you can always come back to it no matter how much time has passed.
100%. One of the people in my writing group has been working on his story for the last 20 years and is now just like really starting to get serious about it. He basically wrote a whole story and he just hasn't looked at it in a really long time. And now he's committed. So yeah, it's interesting to see how people can do that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can come to it at any point in your life as well. I mean, if you're older and you've never done it, you have a lot more experience than a lot of us. Well, I'm not a part of the young folks anymore. I'm like somewhere in the middle where I don't matter. But there's a lot of things you can draw from your life experience that I think is great. Earlier, I said I wrote 1,000 pages a day. I meant to say 1,000 words. I'm an idiot. So if you needed any evidence that I've been hitting the head a lot, there you go.
I mean, we were talking about concussions and maybe not saying the right thing at the right time. So, hey, we've stayed very on theme this whole conversation.
It's actually why I'm really good at callbacks and keeping a consistent theme throughout conversation. I would say it's one of my strengths, actually.
Absolutely.
With a random Alan dunk in there every now and then, which is integral to the show.
I mean, you have to. I'm actually surprised that Alan hasn't made an appearance. I think he got tired of us and left.
Yeah, he's probably playing Final Fantasy 16 and listening and being like, Jimmy, quit talking about me. I will say this, and I actually meant to talk about this at the beginning of the show, but I got distracted by making fun of him. Alan is officially the only guest in Chatting with Nuts history to pass 100,000 views on an episode. Episode 11 got 80,000 views this month, and it is now, I think or maybe it was more, but it is over 100,000, and he has another episode that's over 50,000 and 2 that are crossing the 30,000. So Alan has not just taken first place. He's basically just filled up the top 5. He's 4 of the top 5 now. So congratulations to Alan.
Well done, Alan. It seems like Alan should be your only guest ever again.
Well, I don't think people are actually, watching the episodes necessarily, because I get a lot of comments and they're like, why did someone recommend this? Like, why was this playing on my thing? And someone actually commented on the episode with me and AP and said, what is this, nerds? Which is hilarious. Someone pointed out in my Discord, it's actually hilarious because the person was mad that YouTube recommended it to them, but because they clicked on it, watched it, and then commented, YouTube's probably going to be like, you want some more? And
have all of the Chatting with Nuts.
There's 65 episodes and you're getting every single one of them. Do say you're 69, 420. You're going to get them all. So
that's so funny. I've tried so hard to keep this YouTube for me, like book focused algorithm. But I stupidly the other day was in this one rather than my other one and put on music for my kid. And now the algorithm is like, you definitely want all of this music. And I'm like, no, I do not. All I want is books. And it's just gone. It's all gone. So I know we'll have to start a new one all over again and just hope.
it kind of ebbs and flows, and like
Waxes
people.
and wanes.
Alan's like, why are people watching our video from 2.5 years ago? I go, Alan, I have literally no idea, but I will. I don't know if I don't think I shared this story. I know Alan did, but Alan had a student come in, and this is like the same morning. I text Alan. I go, Alan, our video is at 80,000 views, and he's like, wait, what? Why? A student walks into Alan's classroom. Mr. Walker, do you do live streams on YouTube? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, I woke up this morning and I heard you yelling because I fell asleep with YouTube on. So his student got recommended that video. It auto played.
That's
Imagine that
so
student
funny.
waking up and hearing their teacher screaming in their house on their laptop. I mean, that is a ridiculous thing to think
Oh my
about.
gosh.
But
That's
that's
hilarious.
crazy. I think that video had like 4 million like impressions or recommendations.
Wow.
And
Nice.
apparently it was being recommended to his students.
That's so funny. The last year I was teaching 6th grade full time, and I then did electives for high school, but my 6th graders were my main crew. And to like try to resonate with them and be like, we're all cool here. I was like, I play World of Warcraft. I like video games. We're the same. Let's bond. And they were like, oh, well, then you must use Twitch, which I did. And I was like, yes. And they were like,
Oh,
oh,
no.
what's your Twitch handle? And I was like, I will never tell you that. And they spent the remainder of the year like actively trying to find me on Twitch. I was like, you're never ever gonna find me, because I actively went and like changed all my names, and like you could not find me.
So they didn't
my
find
name.
you.
No, they did not. But they made it a mission that they were like, oh, by the end of the year, like it's definitely gonna happen. I was like, oh God, hopefully not. So, but, yeah, it's terrifying when your students find you on the internet.
I'm impressed they didn't find you just because of how easy it seems to be to link people. And Alan's convinced that their phones heard him talking in the classroom and then found him on YouTube and then recommended it. And I don't know if it goes that deep, but
I mean,
maybe.
We never know. We really never know. I mean, we have an Alexa in our house, and we'll say something and we're sure she picks it up and is like, oh, you must want this. And then all of a sudden we get ads for it on like our YouTube commercial ads. We have the thing, or when we log into Facebook, it's there. I'm like, how? Just how?
I get that with books.
Yeah, it's weird. It's so weird.
Honestly, if you're recommending me books, I'm okay with it. I don't mind.
I don't mind that
me.
either. But like we get weird stuff that is not prevalent to our lives whatsoever. It'll just be something that we're like, hey, did you see this on CNN? And then all of a sudden we're being advertised for it. I'm like, no one needed this or wanted this, Alexa, but thank you.
It's like billboards, but in your house.
Yeah, it's really creepy. What a time to be alive, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
So you're approaching your 1 year on BookTube, and I think you started it for a really cool cause and to motivate yourself. And I think there's a possibility that a lot of people start their channel for that motivation. But
Yeah.
what, if any, goals do you have for your channel, and what are you looking forward to the most to create?
So I wanted to do something funny going forward in addition to like reviews and stuff. So I am planning on doing my version of Unsolved Mysteries on the channel. I have my first thumbnail ready to go. I just need to get my trench coat on and film it this week.
I love it.
The first one I'm starting with is Area Targaryen. And I want to do Unsolved Fantasy Mysteries. Like that's something I want to do, and like
there's a ton in A Song of Ice and Fire.
Exactly. I mean, like most of them will be
Tyreke Lannister.
Yeah,
where'd he go?
So many. Like honestly, there's just so many. So I want to do that because it's fun and it doesn't have to be like super long or like take it seriously or anything like that. I initially was doing a lot more reviews, and I feel like I might get back to that because I genuinely liked doing the reviews. And then I kind of veered off and did some video essays, which I enjoyed doing. Like I did one on death as a character that I really enjoyed researching just because I found it fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I want to talk about is different religions in fantasy, because I really like religion and fantasy and prophecy and fantasy and how they're influenced by our world religions. Mm-hmm. So I like that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking I might head in that direction. But I talked about this because I did a newbie tag video yesterday, even
Yeah.
though I'm 10 months in. And I feel like I haven't established what my voice is on BookTube yet. And I don't really know what role I fill here yet. Because I feel like a lot of positions aren't necessarily filled, but there's people that just do those things so well that I'm like, they're not going to come to me for that. Like the people that do that exceptionally well are established. Like when I think of who does live streams, I'm like, well, Jimmy has Chatting with Nuts and it's great. If it's a Cosmere Connections thing, Bookborn. If it's a book review, I'm like, there's Murphy. So I'm still trying to carve out what my little hole is on
Yeah.
BookTube, I feel like. But I'm okay with it evolving and changing over time to kind of ebb and flow with how I'm feeling and what I'm reading. So yeah, I'm excited for that, I guess. But the unsolved fantasy mystery thing, like I'm genuinely excited to do. Even if no one watches it, like for me, it's fine. Like I put up a video today, which is a play on from Something It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I was like, maybe 2 people will know what this is, and that's fine with me because I think it's funny. So yeah, it's just being okay with what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that you're kind of thinking about, spaces to fill and what you can bring. I think the unsolved mystery thing is absolutely fantastic. You should
Thank
definitely.
you.
And I love what Jared said here, and this is what I was going to bring up. You said, I feel like the baking is your big strength. If that's mixed in somehow, could be really cool. Legends and Lattes, by the way, had a lot of baking in it. So I was kind of surprised you didn't just love it just based on that.
That was my favorite part of the book. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, baking, excellent.
I enjoy your reading vlogs though. Whenever you're baking, all that stuff is great. And it honestly, I want to try reading vlogs to be honest, because no one's doing a reading vlog and going to jiu-jitsu or hitting the gym. You know what I mean? Like I do very weird things. And then I have 2 adorable cats that should be on camera more.
All the time. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel like reading vlogs seem like they're a ton of fun. I know they're a lot of work though, but
I actually find them to be less work. And the reason that I say this is because I look disheveled in most of my reading vlogs because of the fact that I have no makeup on. I'm lucky if I've showered at that point during the day. And I've gotten very comfortable with the fact that I just don't care. If I did care and felt like I needed to be overly presentable in the entirety of the vlog, it would be a lot more work. But it's easy when you're just reading something and you're like, oh, like the duel in Words of Radiance. I immediately picked up my phone and was like, oh my God, this was amazing. Like I just read this. I'm so hyped. And you then put your phone down and you get back to reading. Whereas when I'm sitting here to record a video, I have to get my light out. I have to get the camera set up and everything. I have to make sure my microphones are charged. And that becomes a much bigger production in my mind as opposed to just having 17 clips on my phone.
Yeah. I think for me, I have a whole idea in my head of how things have to go. And that restricts me in more ways than one for multiple video types because I can't not do things a certain way. I'm very particular and it drives me insane. Jared said Unsolved Mystery, Breadcrumbs, Baking plus Book Reviews, a pretty good short.
Yeah, that is true. I did a couple of vlogs called Books and Bakes, I think is what it was called. I probably do more of that coming up soon. Honestly, I've barely baked anything in the last month because COVID has just kicked my ass. But I do need to, for work, actually start baking again. So it probably will be happening soon. But yeah, I find it's easy. I'm sure my husband will come into the kitchen and he's like, are you talking to yourself? And I'm like, no, I'm recording a vlog. He's like, oh, okay. So he's kind of just gotten used to hearing me randomly mumbling throughout the house. So that's been okay.
Well, see, that's nice of you because I just yell at Kelsey whenever I'm talking about a book and she's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And
you
don't understand.
I do that. So my channel initially was a podcast with my husband. And it was called Fantasy Awash with Laura and Josh. And it rhymed. And that's where Fantasy Awash comes from. Because on its own, it's just whatever. But it actively rhymed with Josh, which I thought was funny. So, which it's not. But in my mind, being 2 months postpartum and very sleep deprived, I was like, it's hilarious. Everyone will love it. And we started reviewing shows, and we would talk about the differences between the shows and the books. And we did it with House of the Dragon, and we did it with Rings of Power. And it got to the point where my husband was like, I cannot watch these shows, because we both had major issues with Rings of Power. And he's like, I can't do this. I'm way too tired from work and having a baby. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna start like rambling my thoughts at the internet by myself. And that's how my channel kind of then came into existence. I dropped Josh's name off of it and just started making videos. So I actually do want to have him on the channel at the end of the year as like our best books that we read of the year, because I'm like, you started here, your name's gone, but you were here initially. And bring him back in.
It'll be an Easter egg for the people who've been around for a long time.
Exactly, which I feel like there's one person and that's it. And I'm like, it's cool, you'll get it. And it's Bookborn. She's like the only one that knows. But yeah, it's great. So,
well, now we all know.
Exactly. Now you all know, if you see this like weirdly long-haired man in my videos, that is Josh, and he started out here too.
Oh my goodness. Jared, by the way, Jared has excellent views when it comes to YouTube and ideas. He says, I also think your love of history is a big strength. Deep dives could really suit your strength.
I agree. I just need to find some books that are historical fiction that I really want to read. I had such good luck with Augustus this year. Honestly, I don't think I've read a historical fiction that I enjoyed more than Augustus, but like I am the key audience for that book specifically. It was like John Williams sat down and was like, this girl named Laura is going to live like 30 years from now. And what would she really love? and wrote the book just for me. Like that's how it felt when I read it. And I feel like I will probably never have that experience again. So it's going to be interesting when I really dip my toe back into historical fiction. And part of that this year for me was a catch up, because I have been away from reading for so long. So many new fantasy authors have shown up on the scene in the last few years that I just haven't been privy to. And I was like, I'm really going to mostly read fantasy this year, get refamiliarized with the genre, with the new people. And it's been wonderful because of the fact that I found authors that I genuinely really love. Next year, I'm hoping to maybe branch a little bit back more into historical fiction. And I actually want to do some rereads next year. Like I plan on rereading A Song of Ice and Fire next year, because it's been about 12 years for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I read Fire and Blood this year and I really enjoyed it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have a little bit of an itch to get back to that world. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get news of a book next year. That's my hope and my possible theory. I think we might get a book next year, or announcement of a book next year. So yeah, it'll be some fun stuff coming up.
Yeah, you have a lot of options. I mean, that's another thing, coming at these things fresh, which is great. And you know, Jared's even saying, you know, the historical eye to the world building of fantasy world would be really cool. There's plenty of stuff out there. I will say,
you can keep coming with them. I'm good.
Jared has a good eye for this stuff. He really does. He was extremely helpful chatting with him about, you know, channel stuff after.
Yeah, I loved the chat the two of you guys had. I was telling Johanna, thank you, John. After watching your guys' chat, like normally I'm very happy to have a chat on in the background and just listen and be like, oh, this is fun. I don't think I've ever wanted to interject myself more to a conversation than your conversation with Jared. I was actively speaking at my screen when you guys were talking about Marcus Aurelius. I was like, I have so many things to say. So yeah, I feel like that is for me very evocative of a wonderful conversation. So I genuinely really enjoyed the talk that the two of you had.
I did too. It was very illuminating, but also Jared is just one of those people who can he can say things that will literally blow your mind, but he also is extremely welcoming. And just very approachable person. That's why I want to talk to him. That's why I enjoyed his channel. It's very, I don't want to use the word cozy, but I think welcoming is maybe the word.
Welcoming is a good term.
Yeah,
I would agree. Everyone has a place there, it feels like.
Yeah.
You can find something.
Yeah, and he didn't make me look dumb, which is much appreciated, as I am an uneducated swine. So
I feel like You are the only person that has that perception of you. Honestly.
No, the One Piece fans think I'm pretty dumb.
Well, to be fair, like fandoms right now are just manic. So I don't think that is really anything about you. It's more about the fandom.
I have like 100 comments I've deleted today that called me all types of bad. So, and all related to my intelligence.
Yeah, it's just people. Okay. I did live chats with Christopher Navo, who's a really lovely booktuber. If you're not following him, please go follow Chris. About Wheel of Time. And there was a person, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna name his name, but I refer to him as Rafe Burner because anytime I said something critical about that show, there were comments in my feed about how my opinion was wrong and their opinion was fact. I was like, you understand by the very nature of it being an opinion that it can't be fact, right? But like he came at us every single episode. Like we knew the second the stream ended, there would be a comment there. And it's so funny. Like people get so particular about these things and the fandoms are they're just wild. But I am curious about this because like he and I are talking about doing a One Piece watch now. So I'll have to keep an eye out as to what we say to, avoid these comments.
It can be dangerous, but I think it could be Rafe. Rafe possibly. I mean, who knows?
Rafe Burner is alive and active on BookTube because I then saw him on other people's Wheel of Time content, who also maybe had some not so super positive things to say, defending them as well. But I do have a question for you. So I recently read my first manga, like ever. You started your channel about this recently. I thought this channel was established like a long time ago. And I went to it not long ago. I was like, oh, this is new. So is reading manga new to you or is it just the channel itself that's new to you?
Oh, yeah, no, it was, well, the channel's newer, but I covered Berserk on here for like, I don't know, almost a year and a half, 2 years. But Berserk was my first manga. And since then I've read a decent amount, but like I'm nowhere near, you know what I mean? Like some people, but I've read a decent amount of manga and I love it. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about manga right now. I'm not in a good headspace about manga right now, but I would say that I'm still newer to it. Yeah. Like I've only been reading for maybe 2 years. But I do love it. And I actually read manga that I just like don't talk about as well. Like that's a thing I do. That might be how I do One Piece from now on. I might not make any more One Piece videos, honestly. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it. And I never really even thought about doing it. I never, and then you see some of your friends trying it. And of course, that's enough to get you kind of curious. And then I had a lot of people in my comments that were just saying, hey, Berserk is something you should check out because you like this, this, and this. And there are people who do both, right? And they're saying these things have ties. So yeah, it's definitely something that was new to me, very uncomfortable at first, and I didn't know what to expect, but I have found some of my favorite stories reading through it. Attack on Titan just ended. The anime just ended.
Yes,
the manga's been over for a while. You want to talk about a polarizing ending? Woo, boy, those are some toxic conversations.
Yeah. So I had never read any, and I don't know why that is. Like, I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon and all that kind of stuff, but like just then never picked up a manga. And I think it was maybe because it was like, oh, it's not a book. And there was like a weird distinction in my brain where I was like, oh, it's like a comic book, but I want to read books. And it was this weird intellectual idea that like books are smart and manga is not. You know, and I was like, that's ridiculous and absolutely ludicrous that I had that idea, not that other people necessarily gave that idea to me. And I kept seeing on BookTube, people were like, all kinds of manga. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna check it out. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it. I was a total spaz when I picked it up because I didn't realize that you read it from basically like the opposite way in which we normally read a book. And I was so confused. I picked it up and I was like, what's happening here? And I actually had to Google. I was like, how do you properly read manga?
Oh, I Googled it. I Googled it. I'm not ashamed to say it.
I was so confused, but it was such an enjoyable read. So I'm definitely planning on reading more and trying more out. But I thought, yeah, it was interesting because I wasn't sure if it was also new to you based on the newness of the channel or not. But
Yeah, definitely. I've found some really great conversations about some of the series that I've read, and
Mhm.
I'm very fond of them. And I just say, if you're a fan of stories and you want more stories, then there's a lot of stories over here being told from a very different perspective that I think is
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah, honestly, like that in terms of characters, kind of what we were saying earlier, like that's what I'm looking for in that kind of story. And like, I don't know if I'll get the best character development out of a manga, but you can get a really good character driven story with other things going on, it seems like. So it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, if you're looking for stories, they're everywhere, and it's a different thing. So it flexes a bit of a different muscle, which I
Yeah.
also like. It keeps my stamina high, so I can just keep doing these things because I like all of that stuff more than watching TV, or well, sometimes playing video games. Depends on my mood, but
Are you not a big TV watcher then?
no, not really. It takes a lot. Now, I'd love documentaries and documentary
Okay.
series, but like, yeah, I probably watch compared to most people, I watch very little television, I would say.
That's my husband. I have to like force him to watch things with me.
Yeah.
But I love a documentary too. So I'm all for that. The one that I've been the most obsessive about lately is Welcome to Wrexham. And I'm like, everyone should watch it, especially if they like Ted Lasso. Um, so if you like a documentary about football, there you go.
All right.
British football, though, not American football.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yes.
Well, we've been going for about 2 hours, 20 minutes, and I don't want to take up all of your night, but I do have one final question for you.
Yes.
What is the most underrated baked good going into the holiday season? Like what is something you feel like people don't put enough respect on the name?
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay. I feel like this is kind of niche because it's a British dessert, but because we're probably mostly North American based audience, I'm gonna say it. Treacle tart is so good. And the reason that I knew about treacle tart growing up is that it's Harry Potter's favorite food. And I did a thing on my website where I have a recipe for every Harry Potter food. Like I actively baked my way through Harry Potter. So when I came across treacle tart, I was like, what is this? It's a tart that's base is breadcrumbs and a golden syrup, which sounds terrible. And it is actively the most delicious thing. It's sweet. It's just like the perfect balance of sweet and salty flavors. It's so good and it's super, super easy to make. Highly recommend treacle tart. And if you want to like put something on your Christmas holiday table that's different that people don't know about, treacle tart for the win. Yeah.
Boom, you got it there, folks. I'm looking at it right now. It says a buttery, flaky pastry crust is filled with a sweet and gooey lemon-infused filling. The traditional tart recipe features one of the Great Britain's most famous desserts at its best. And
Yes.
honestly, it kind of looks like pumpkin pie,
A little.
and pizza.
But it's not. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of that, and anything with frangipan, which is an almond filling, is super, super good. So if you find like a frangipan tart, those two clutch, absolutely clutch.
That's amazing. So there you go, folks. That's what you got to bring to your potluck at your work or to your family functions this
If you want
holiday.
to get all the really good gifts and praise, that's what you bring
There it
people.
is. That's a good one. I love it. Laura, thank you for being here on a Friday night. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you made a channel. I'm glad that you're feeling better. And
Thank
I'm
you. You
also
too.
glad that you decided to join the conversation. People, her channel is below. I still need to correct the description, by the way. I just haven't been on my computer. But another thing I would like you to pitch is your blog, if you feel comfortable doing that. Is that something you'd like to do?
Sure. My website is www.siftrva .com, not at anything. The RVA is because I started it when we lived in Richmond, Virginia. So there's that. And you sift flour and sugar. So I thought it was a very fun play on words. It's all gluten-free recipes because I have celiac disease, but a lot of the recipes are 1-to-1. So there's that. And if you've got any other allergens or things like that, I cater to there on that as well, just because there's always something these days. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, folks, go check out Laura's YouTube channel. Go check out her blog. And I hope to have you back on soon. And let's talk some A Song of Ice and Fire in the future.
That sounds good. I think I froze here.
Oh, that's
Can you
okay.
still hear me?
I can hear you. It's perfect
Okay,
timing. It's a good free shot, honestly. It's not bad.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Folks, thank you for being here in the chat on a Friday night. I hope everyone is doing well. The next episode should be 2 weeks from now, but that is Black Friday, right around Thanksgiving. So I'm either going to do the week following that, or I may do then 2 weeks on a Tuesday, the 21st of November, because that is my birthday. So I may possibly do a special Tuesday night right before Thanksgiving with a special guest, but we'll see. I'm not sure. So keep an eye out on the community tab. Go subscribe to Fantasy Awash down in the description below, whose camera is back on. And hey, it worked
A
perfectly.
different camera,
Right?
yeah.
The backup camera. Oh my. That's that.
Yes, this
You're
is
prepared.
the webcam camera. So yeah,
That's
I've always
great.
got that built in.
I love to see it. Folks,
Mhm.
if you like this stream, feel free to like. If you hated it, you can also dislike it. And if you aren't subscribed and you're just checking us out for the first time and you just woke up and it's 6 a.m. and this is playing on your TV, hit subscribe. It helps out the channel. I'd love to have you.
You're
But
one of
thanks you for
Alan's
being here.
students.
Yes, if you're one of Alan's students, throw spit wads at Alan during class. Folks, I appreciate you so very much. And we'll see you again real soon here. Oh, wait, what's the close for this one? I just did Dudes Talking Manga. What's my close? Do you remember?
Remember to
Oh,
always
be
keep
good. Yes, be good, be safe. Remember to always keep turning the page. I'm losing it. I'm losing it, folks.